Hey Peter, how are you doing?
Doing great. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. How about you? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Had some trouble with it last time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just hiding down in my wife's office.
Nice.
When I
How have
did
you been?
I've been doing great. Yeah. When I did the like all the interviews for the show, I I had to do them in here, but like I took down all her degrees and stuff and I put up my own stuff. I had to rebuild it, so you can still kind of see like some holes in the wall over here where I,
Yeah.
I got like my bow and stuff up there. I'm like, I don't really have a place to store that other than the closet. So I was like, well, it doesn't make it look like cool. But, so I had
Yeah.
like,
No, I did the same thing through some interviews. I went into a spare room that we had and I did the same thing. I hung up all of my stuff behind me, a bunch of
yeah.
different traps, my bow, and yeah, it left a bunch of holes too.
Yeah, I'll get around to fixing those one day.
Yeah. One day.
Once I get all the other projects done.
Well, did you enjoy your vacation?
Yeah, we went down to Idaho and went to this little theme park called Silverwood.
Nice.
It's a pretty cool place. Got lots of roller coasters and a big water park, and kids love it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's
What
pretty
is
fun.
it called?
Silverwood.
Silverwood.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Awesome.
this early 1900s themed Old West kind of setting, and they got like a train, and
Oh,
it's
that's cool.
it's pretty
Got a
cool.
spot kind of like that, not too far from here in Alabama. It's at a waterfall. I can't remember the name of the park though. I can see it, but I can't remember the name of the park. But we got a bunch of old log cabins, an old timber framed covered bridge and stuff. It's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
We go
Yeah.
there. We went there a couple times, so almost every summer we go because it's only like a 2.5 hour drive from my house. So
Oh, that's not bad at all.
no, not really. It's I live I think 4 hours is the next big city in Canada. It's actually easier to go.
Oh,
Like we drive to Spokane to do a lot of shopping because it's closer.
oh, nice.
Yeah, it's just like straight. We're like straight north of Spokane by about 2.5 hours, 3 hours. We're like right by the border, so it's easy.
That's awesome. Well, you can't beat that.
No, it's pretty good.
Yeah. You live out pretty far?
Uh, no, I live in sort of a town. It's like I live in a city called Castlegar, but it's got about 7,000 people. And I live on the very like southern edge of it. So like south of me, there's no one. We have
Okay.
like our own little community almost. It's like 4 or 5 blocks, and then there's like nothing around us. We're just off the highway. It's kind of cool because like I'm technically in the city, but like I can go hiking behind my house and hiking trails and stuff. So it's kind of like we're also out in the middle of nowhere. So it's a good balance.
Technically city, but you can still have a fire. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Like kids can still go to school because I would love to live in the middle of nowhere, but like, they have friends and
Yeah.
activities they want
Oh,
to do. So, I gotta kind of have that balance.
trust me, I know.
Once they're out in
Uh,
university or whatever, I'm out of here. I'm going.
I was actually wondering because you said you were a librarian. I was wondering if it
Yeah.
was a school, if you worked at the school, or if it was like a public library or what.
Yeah. Well, we moved to BC about almost 3 years ago now, and I worked in an elementary school as an elementary school librarian for a
Oh, that's
long time.
awesome.
And now I work for the local government. It's kind of like we call it a regional district, but I think it's like a county is a more common name for them, kind of the same thing. And they have like this big archive that no one's ever gone through. So right now that's my job is just cataloging all these old things in their archive. So
Oh,
that's
I bet that. Me personally, I would find that it would be very fun for me to do that.
yeah, it gets a little
Especially,
tedious sometimes, but
well, there's no telling what you'll come across. In is it like so? It's just the historical archives, or
it's
uh,
like it's mostly just like documents and files that people have put down there, and then there's a bunch of old records that no one's really ever gone through. And so I have to go through each one, catalog them all. So it does get tiring sometimes, and I miss the engagement, like the doing story times and helping kids
yeah.
find books and doing book talks and stuff. That was great, but yeah, this is you gotta it was something I had to do in order to like live here, which I really wanted to do. So everything I do outside of work is the reason we moved here, and then so that's still good.
Well, there's no telling what the future holds.
That's right.
Uh, yeah, there's. things can change at any minute. It would be really cool to be an elementary school teacher or like a librarian though, because I can remember going into the library when I was in elementary school and getting, you know, the scary books and stuff like that, you know. And I remember the librarian was a really, really cool person.
It's the best job it's the best job in the school because like kids come in and you can have fun with them, and then at the end of the day they go back to their classroom where their teacher's responsible for them. I don't have to do report cards or discipline anyone. They just come to the library and have fun and read, and then they're gone for a while. But yeah, and you get to meet everyone in the school. Like we had about 300 kids in that school, and you see every one of them all year, and you get to learn all their names. And it's definitely the best job.
Oh yeah. That would be really fun, especially like you said, the story time, and I'm sure y'all had a bunch of other different little activities and stuff.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Kids love, you know, if there's a book with underpants in it, kids love it, guaranteed.
Oh yeah, yeah. All the kids that I know, if you say fart or poop, you won. You know, they love you after that because you're just hilarious because you can say poop.
You know, as long as they're reading, it doesn't matter, right? They could have
that's exactly right.
Jokes in the world, it's that they're engaged and they're reading those books. That's what matters.
That's exactly right. I said in one of my I think it was the first recap with you in it. I said I bet he's read every survival book that has ever been written and has retained all that knowledge.
Yeah, I've definitely got a few. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about those. Like I did one book review already, and I'll do some more because I've got so many and I'd love to share them with everyone.
Awesome. Yeah. Luke actually brought me a book. He brought everybody one of his dad's books.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I don't have that one. I'll have to get it.
Yeah, I'm sure if you contact him, I'm sure if you contact Luke, he would gladly send it to you.
That'd be cool.
He's just an awesome person.
Yeah, might have to try
that. I can't remember how to pronounce it. I have such a hard. I think it's Trebuchet.
Trebuchet, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's the tray bucket. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Did you went out in the woods and just built that just with stuff around, or?
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about that one for so long in my head, and I'm just always trying to like think of an excuse to go build one. And then it was actually the very last day I had to do casting videos because it was like the Sunday and I had to go back to work the next day. I took 2 days off and then I spent the weekend out there just doing casting stuff. And I'm like, okay, I've got like half a day. I got to do one more thing. And I was originally going to build a canoe I wanted to build a canoe and like a downrigger on my canoe, just to bushcraft up some kind of downrigger and go fish for some like big trout or something. But where I was actually, you weren't allowed to cut greenwood, which I would need for the canoe to bend it, right? So I'm like, okay, well that's out. And then I'm like, well, I'll just build that trebuchet I've been thinking about for so long. And then like I already had it built in my head several times, so it was pretty easy, pretty fast once it started. But yeah, and it was like because I was trying to cast my hand line out in the river, but I couldn't get it very far with my little wooden fishing lure I made. I'm like, I know how I can get this fishing lure halfway across the river. I'll just launch it the trebuchet. It worked really well, actually.
Oh, I bet. How big of a stone would that thing throw? Like, how much of a counterweight did you have on it?
It had a pretty decent sized counterweight. Like you can launch a good like fist size rock, and I think it was more limited to like the sling that I made for it of some paracord. If I'd made that bigger, I probably could have launched a bigger rock. But you know, I kept trying to launch bigger and bigger rocks and adding more and more counterweight, and eventually it like kind of fell apart. But but I had like a good like half day of fun with that thing for sure. That was so fun to make. I still have it in my yard actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh man, you should send me a picture of it. I would love to see the whole thing, not just a little clip of the whole thing.
I'll have to reassemble it. Yeah, it's pretty fun. I don't think I could launch it in my neighborhood. Maybe throw some tennis balls or something. But
that would be really fun actually.
Yeah,
I live up on the side of a mountain, so if I built one, I could probably sling that thing forever off the side.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. Like I said, it was something I'd had in my head for a long time, and I was like, finally, I get to build this thing. I have an excuse. I can actually do it. And yeah, it was super
It,
fun.
it caught me by surprise. I've never seen anyone build something like that. You know, a mechanical. I've seen mechanical traps,
Yeah,
but that's a whole different kind of weapon. You know, a
yeah,
tool, a weapon, whatever you want to call it. I've never seen anything like that
siege
on
engine.
a casting table.
Yeah, it was surprisingly not that hard. Like it's pretty like basic knots and like it's like two tripods and then like a cross, and that's really and it swings in between the two tripods. Basically, it was super easy.
Nice. I bet the trigger mechanism was probably the hardest part, getting it where you can pull it and it comes open. I don't know.
Yeah,
I've never done it before.
I think like the trickiest thing was like where the sling attaches to the throwing arm. You have like a piece of like a stick that's like angled, and then that determines when it lets go of the sling. So you had to play around with that angle to like adjust it because if it was too if it wasn't steep enough, it would like let go of the sling too early, and then the rock would just like fall right in front. And then
Oh,
if you let it go a little later, then it would go a little farther. So that was probably the most tricky part, just getting that tuned in.
uh, I think Alan said that he had came up with a way to cast his line out with his bow, you know,
Oh yeah,
and which is awesome. But I would have loved to see you build a trebuchet and just send a line because that thing probably went. You know, you could probably send it all the way across the river there.
where I was definitely. Yeah, you could definitely send it
Yeah.
across the river into one of the other lakes across the river, probably. And messages to the other contestants.
Oh, that would have been awesome. That would have been another first. Somebody sent a message in a bottle to the other contestant.
Yeah,
Hey, I'm
it'd
just
be
listening
possible
here.
because I think everyone was on a river. So if you're at the far end of that river, you could definitely send some messages down. I don't know if anyone would get them, but you can
Uh, so talking about your casting tapes, what made you want to apply for the show? What led up to you, you know, getting online and applying for the show?
try. Well, when I first saw Alone, I was like extremely impressed by how hard it looked. It looked like an extremely difficult thing, which I love. And the best part about Alone is that it's you versus you, right? Like there's other contestants, but honestly, it doesn't matter if there's other contestants, really. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's a competition of like how good you can do against yourself. And everything that I compete in, like I compete in uh, jujitsu, mixed martial arts. So even when I'm competing in like chess, stuff like chess too, and it's always all the things that I love to do the most are like me determining whether or not I win or lose, right? It's not like a football game where if someone fumbles the ball, then you lose, and it's like I wasn't even in that part of the field. Like, why do I lose? you know. But it's like
Yeah.
the team sports thing. I don't really like depending on other people. So everything that I do, I like to do like one on one because it's a good test, and you really get to know if the stuff you're learning is actually like useful. And I've always loved the bushcraft and survival stuff since I was a kid. So when I saw Alone, one, I was like blown away by the fact that there were other people who like to do this stuff. Because I always do it all by myself. I'm like, I've never really met a lot of people who like to do this. And yeah, it seemed like an extremely like authentic and difficult challenge. There's no producers setting you up for things like on shows like Survivor or other reality shows, right? There's no camera people following you around. It was just like you and nature, and that's it. You're against yourself, and I wouldn't say you're against nature because you're not really against nature. You're kind of working alongside it and with it. But like at the
Part
end
of
of
it.
the day, yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, it comes down to you, right? And your skills, your attitude, your my case, your ability to sleep at night, things like that. So yeah, it was
Uh,
that individual you versus you challenge that I thought was really cool.
I like how you brought up the show Survivor.
Yeah.
Now that I think I watched one episode of Survivor and I never watched it again. I couldn't even tell you what season it's on. It's been on forever. I don't know why people liked it, but hey, you know what? It is what it is. But have you ever seen Dual Survival?
I I think I've seen some of it. Yeah, there's a.
Yeah, they send two people out there
Yeah,
and they got two different kind of survival tactics or whatever, and they kind of
yeah,
clash. Well, at the beginning of that, it says that they help whoever it is if they get into a situation where they need help. You
yeah,
know, if they're there for 3 days and they haven't had water, they're going to give them some water.
yeah.
Alone, alone's not like that.
No,
If
exactly.
you haven't eaten in 6 days, you just went 6 days without eating. That's just all
That's
there
right.
is to it.
Yeah.
You know, they don't. A lot of people say, you know, they think it's fake, is what it is, but it's not. It's
No.
just you
Yeah.
out there.
Exactly. It's like completely authentic. Like it's just you. It's what they show is what's actually happening. Sometimes it's maybe not in the right order, but it actually happened to you, and
Yeah.
you're on your own, and you have like I don't think people realize how like the 10 items seems like you got 10 things. That's a lot, right? But it's like the absolute minimum. Even
Yeah,
if you
it
had
takes
11
months.
items, it would be so much easier.
It takes like 2 months to decide what 10 items you're going to take too. You
Yeah, exactly.
know,
Yeah, yeah. I
even
had
me, I came with extra stuff just in case I changed my mind.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I brought a bunch of stuff because I wasn't sure if I was going to take my knife, my bushcraft knife, or the multi tool, and I wasn't sure about the axe or the shovel. I was going back and forth with that, and yeah, so I didn't decide right till like the day before we had to, kind of thing.
Oh man, the decision between taking a Leatherman and taking my belt knife was like
Yeah,
the hardest thing ever. It was one of the I was holding both of them in my hand at the last minute, trying to figure out which one was going with me. You know.
yeah. For me, I picked the Leatherman just because of the like the trapping. I knew it'd be way easier because I was taking steel snare wire just because I think it works better, but
Yeah.
it's also really hard to break with your hands. The brass you can kind of break with your hands or hit with your knife without damaging your knife blade because it's soft. But if I was using the steel snare wire, I need those wire cutters and the pliers. You get
Yeah.
guys like William, man, that guy, you just like I don't know, man. His fingers are like robotic. He just grabs a snare wire and he just like breaks it off and twists it, and you're like, doesn't that hurt? Like he's just done it so much, and I was like, wow.
That's the main reason I went with the Leatherman. I think that's the main reason a lot of people do is because like me, I'm a bushcrafter and wood carver too, and I was like, I'm gonna make a bunch of lures, and I'm gonna need this wire to put
Yeah,
the hooks on the
exactly.
lures, and so on and so forth, and rabbit snares and squirrel snares. So that's why I
Mhm.
went with the Leatherman.
Yeah, I
Uh,
ended up taking mostly steel snare wire, and
yeah,
yeah, I just don't think I'd
I
be able.
took two different kinds of snare wire. I took brass
Yeah,
and I took the steel. But and the reason I took both was to have variation in color.
yeah,
You know, it wasn't so much for traps, it was for fishing. I wanted to
mhm,
make some that were silver and some that were brass, you know, just
exactly.
kind of, yeah, have that little variation.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits too. And then um, we were allowed to do some like snares, but that for animals that required braiding your snare wire, which is way easier to do with brass. So that
Oh,
was another good
awesome.
reason. So yeah, that's braiding snare wire is hard. With the steel, it's pretty rigid, but with the brass wire, it's pretty easy.
What animals were you allowed to snare there? Like
I
we
think
weren't allowed, we were only rabbits and squirrels. That was the only thing we could snare.
yeah, we had the snowshoe hare and squirrels, but we were also allowed to trap lynx. There were lynx up there. We had a permit for that. So and that required like a braided fourth braided strand snare with the
Yeah.
with the brass snare wire. So yeah, you'd have to braid for the lynx anyway. I think most animals we weren't allowed to trap, like ducks and stuff. We had to shoot, or like martins and stuff. You could trap those, but I don't know why you're allowed to shoot them but not trap them. and
I don't know.
but
It seemed crazy to me too. Whenever they told us that we couldn't trap martins or anything. You know,
yeah,
uh, I couldn't make a bird cage and trap grouse in a bird cage. I had to
yeah,
shoot them. Man, that just it makes it so much harder. You
yeah. We
know,
had like it does. Yeah, we had beaver and there were muskrat too. We were allowed to trap beaver and muskrat.
nice.
There were lots of beavers
Never
in the
thought.
river, but they were always on the other side of the river from me. They're smart creatures. They never came on my side. Not that I ever saw.
Well, I mean that didn't hold you back though. As soon as you got that one fish, it was. But what was the time frame? Was it the next day? Because the alone time frame can really play with your mind. You know, if you're watching the show here at home, we think, okay, that happened the next morning. He got up, he said, "Hey, I'm going to go." That happened the next morning. What was the time frame between catching that first fish and then catching those 5 big fish back to back?
Yeah.
But congratulations, by the way. I think that's the most weight of fish that anybody's ever caught at one time all alone.
It was that was a lot of fish. So that first fish I caught on day 6, like really late at night. Day 6, I woke up and I was like, okay, I haven't caught a fish yet, so I'm literally gonna spend all day fishing. And I woke up and I built my gill net and I put it in the water, like as soon as it was light enough out. So probably like 6:30, I started working on it, and then as soon as I just worked on it nonstop, I didn't take a break. It took a couple hours probably. Didn't turn out as big as I thought it would, but we were allowed a 12-foot long gill net. I think mine was maybe 8 feet, maybe not even that long, 6 feet maybe. But then I put that gill net in the water, and then literally the rest of the day I just hand lined from that, probably like 12 hours of hand lining before I finally caught that fish.
Wow.
And
that takes a lot out there, man, because it's not like you're standing next to your buddy talking fishing.
I know.
It's constant throwing out and winding it back up.
Yeah, I walked. I had to, like, where my shelter was, that area of the beach was really muddy, it's hard to stand in. But if you walked about 400 or 500 meters down, which is like about a quarter mile, there was like a nice sandy beach that I could stand on. So I would walk down there to do my fishing because I could stand without getting stuck in the mud. And it was a really nice sandy beach. And I did most of my fishing out there. And then finally at like 6 or 7 o'clock at night, I would check the time on the camera, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna head back. And I just like hand lined it. I take a few steps and then throw it out, take a few steps all the way back to my shelter. And right at where my shelter was, the beach was flat, and then there was like a cliff, so I couldn't walk past that. And then straight up the hill from there was my shelter. So, and I don't know how it turned out on TV, but like I caught that first fish right at the edge and like literally the last spot that I could catch. And I stood there and I'm like, I don't want to stop fishing yet. So I threw it out a few more times and I caught that fish, but it was like I couldn't go any farther and I was just about to give up because it was getting dark out. And then I was like, caught that fish. I was so excited when I grabbed that fish. Well, I almost felt bad for it, even though I was going to eat it. But I grabbed that fish like so hard that I thought like my fingers were going to go into the fish because I was like, I'm not dropping this fish ever for any reason. I was just like squeezing it hard as I can. I'm like, I've got this fish. Like, I didn't want to risk dropping it, and it actually fell off the hook came out as I was like pulling it up, and I was like, no, and I was like, I thought my fingers were going to go straight through that fish. I was squeezing it so hard, and I was like. And I knew the fish in that river, like if you put a baited line out, you've got pike on it, like guaranteed. And I knew like once I had that first fish, that because I tried squirrels, I tried trapping squirrels, tried trapping hare. I had a bunch of traps out. I even had deadfall traps out for mice, and the mice were like, I assumed there was mice out there. I don't know. They didn't take any of my bait or go in my traps. But so I tried to get some sort of like meat to catch this fish. And then once I had that fish, I was like, okay, I'm set. Like I can just cut like the guts out of this or the fins or whatever. And then I immediately set a couple set lines out. And then the fish you see me catching are all from the next morning.
Awesome.
Got up and I checked my net and my set lines, and they were just like, they're all full of fish.
Man, I bet that was I know catching that first fish had to be exciting, but I bet each time you pulled in another fish, I can only imagine just the excitement, raising up. Oh my God, there's another one. There's another one.
It was crazy. And it was like I pulled out that one big one. It was, I don't know, it must have been like a meter long, which is like 40 inches or maybe even more than that. And it was like, that's probably my biggest fish I've ever caught in my life. And definitely the first burbot I've ever caught for sure. I've never even seen a burbot before. I mean, I know they have them here, but they're like bottom fish that I can't catch for shore anyway, or from my canoes. Not in the lake by my house anyway, but that was the first burbot I saw, definitely. And that pike was probably the biggest fish I caught like ever. And it was hard to, but yeah, it was pretty exciting. I brought all those fish back, and then I made that, like, started working on the smoker, right? And then I was like, wasn't originally planning on doing that, but I was like, okay, I've got this this huge haul of fish. Like, I do need to preserve it. I probably could have just cooked it and then ate it over the next couple of days because it was like pretty close to the same temperature as your like refrigerator out there, like 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. So they would stay if you put them up in the tree. And
Yeah, that I noticed that in the captions it was saying how cold it already was.
yeah,
And I said, wow, that's amount when they dropped us, it was like 70 degrees,
yeah,
and we had to work through the heat into the cold. Y'all just started out in the cold.
yeah. It was overcast too, and but it was good for food, I guess. And yeah, I got this big batch of fish, and I wasn't originally going to build like a cold smoker. I figured maybe I'd smoke fish eventually, but I'm like, okay, this is my chance to just put away some food for the future. Like I'll just spend a few days smoking this fish, and then I'll have like my emergency supply that I won't have to worry about anymore. But yeah, that definitely wasn't my original plan to do that. I didn't think I'd catch that many fish at once. And I'm like, this is like 25 pounds of fish, so maybe more. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
that would have been awesome to have that put up, and especially because you still had weight on you,
yeah,
so you could eat and then just go back to fishing and just have that reserve. That would have been awesome. You
yeah,
know, it would have been awesome to see it play out like that. I guess what I'm trying to say.
yeah.
Uh,
I put on like about 60 pounds for the show.
wow.
As soon as I,
Uh,
as soon as they replied to my original like message about email, and they were like, "Hey, make some casting videos," I was like, "All right, bring on the food. Let's get started." I figured if I didn't make it on the show, I could just lose the weight, but if I did make it on the show, I would regret not starting so soon. So
yeah.
I gained a ton of weight for that. So I wasn't too worried about it. It
Uh,
comes off
I was
pretty
going to
fast.
ask you, did you make any special preparations or anything like that? Like you put on weight? Did you have
Mhm.
to make any preparations for the people that you left at home, stuff like that? And also on top of that question, uh, putting on weight and then going out there, did that affect the way that you were moving and stuff like that? I know that it's got to kind of like it has to weigh you down a little bit because you put
Yeah.
on weight, you know.
It definitely thought about a lot of things before going to the show. And, I watched like every episode of Alone, right? I'm like a huge fan of the show before ever applying to be on it. So I have kind of looked at like reasons why people quit. And so a lot of my preparation was we did some of that. Like, had a lot of good talks with the family, and I know a lot of people quit because they miss their kids, they miss their family, and they want to be with them, right? So one of the things we did to prepare was, I had my family like tell me like that it's okay for me to go out there, and it's okay for me to be gone for a few months, and they're not going to be like upset with me or mad at me. And I needed to hear that before going out, because I didn't want to be having that feeling of guilt the whole time that I'd like abandoned them, right? Especially the time of year they're just getting ready to go to school, and I've never missed a first day of school before, so that was a first. And yeah, I knew I'd have to gain a bunch of weight just in case. It's a good idea, even if you're catching food, you still good to have that reserve, right? Just to keep you a bit healthy. And
Oh yeah.
so there was that. Yeah, I gained a ton of weight. I mostly ate like mixed nuts, and I've heard people gaining weight with olive oil, so I got some of that. But man, that was so gross. And,
Uh,
so the mixed nuts have like enormous amount of calories, and I ate so many nuts. And not gonna lie, I ate a lot of mall Chinese food too. And I was like, hey,
my
just
wife,
eat the whole
my
thing.
wife told me about somebody she looked it up and saw how people were gaining weight for the show or something like that because I can't eat and work. So all
Yeah,
day long I don't eat, and then I eat a big meal at the end of the day. So it's hard for me to just gain weight
yeah,
really fast, you know. I'm big, don't get me wrong. I got a belly and everything, but she said that somebody was drinking olive oil and stuff like that. And I said, there is no way I'm gonna choke down just
yeah.
raw oil. That's terrible. I couldn't
It
do I would
is.
just throw up.
It was hard. You had to do a little at a time. And the trick is there's actually a different kind of olive oil for drinking. Like you don't drink
Uh,
the cooking olive oil. It's it. And people do
yeah.
it all
Oh,
the time.
I wasn't gonna try it. I was
Yeah.
no.
It was hard for me because like I don't normally eat breakfast, and usually I'll have like a little bit of lunch, and then I'll eat like dinner when I get home. It'll be like a big meal. That's kind of how my body like naturally does it. So and I felt like gross all the time. Like it just felt like full all the time, and I was like, well, I had to buy new pants. I had these pants. They're like they look like normal work pants, but they were kind of sweatpants. And I called them my big boy pants. I had to wear my big boy pants. And they just had like an elastic band and like a stretchy string, and I was like, "This is my big boy
That's
pants.
so awesome.
I got to wear my big boy pants now." But yeah, it was for a good cause, I guess. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was tough. And yeah, and getting like my family into it, making sure that they were cool with me going out there, that was important. And my son asked me to record some messages for him on we've got like a Amazon Echo at home, because you can make like announcements on it or schedule announcements or reminders, right? So
That's so
I don't
awesome.
know how long it'd be out there, so we had like a happy Halloween message on there for him and a couple other messages on there. So that was
That's so
like,
awesome, Peter. That
yeah,
it really it speaks to the type of person you are. So for days before I went, just to share a story with you, days before I left, uh, I sat down and I recorded video after video after video, just good night videos, singing
yeah,
my son good night, messages to my wife, messages to my kids for their birthdays that I was gonna miss, and
right,
everything else, and you know, Thanksgiving, Halloween, all this stuff, and
yeah,
because you don't know how long you're going to be out there.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I tried to cover all the bases, and kind of made me choke up hearing you say that you recorded the messages there, man. That's
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully, no one's birthday was while I was gone. Thankfully, but recording messages for like first day of school and
yeah,
holidays, and my son made me ask me to record a little video with him, and I guess I don't know if he could watch that when I was gone. Yeah, so
that's awesome.
that was important, and then yeah, just getting everyone like it's hard on you, but it's hard on them too when you're gone,
Yeah,
and especially when they're used to having you around so much. And so
yeah,
we had to like plan for both of those things, and then the other prep that I did was mostly just like site specific stuff. Like I've never used a gill net before because they're not legal where I live.
yeah.
You can't fish with a gill net, so I have no experience one. But I got these two sort of beams in my backyard, and I built a miniature gill net between those beams. Like every couple of days, I'd go and build one, to spend like half an hour, and then I'd cut it in pieces and I'd practice repairing it because I had no experience in that before.
Nice.
And then yeah, other than that, it was mostly researching like the animals that like I've never trapped a lynx or a beaver. I don't have a trapping license, so all I can trap here is snowshoe hare, which is still fun. But
Yeah,
so all those like animal specific types of traps and I built like I don't know if I still have a few of them in my backyard, but I built like different types of snares for beaver and lynx, and I just built them in my backyard, and then I take them down and build them up again just to get that. So it was like something I memorized before going out there.
the muscle memory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one thing to like see a picture of it or like think about it, and then it's another thing to actually do it and like have that like experience of doing it, because then like what process works and what doesn't, or what order to do things in, and that works more efficiently.
So you didn't bring a bow, right?
I brought a bow. Yeah, yeah. I
You
brought a
did bring a
bow.
bow?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm sorry. I had somebody confused. I'm so sorry.
that was William.
You
William
did-
didn't bring a bow.
William didn't bring a
He
bow.
brought his
Okay,
gill net.
I'm so sorry about that.
He's like,
Uh,
I don't know how to use a bow, so why would I bring one? I'm like, it's a good point.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, that's my fault. I'm sorry about that.
Well, that's
Because
okay.
I was trying to remember everybody's gear list and everything else, and
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy. Please, I apologize.
Well, that's
Life's
cool.
hectic.
That's a lot to match 100 items you got to remember.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
lord.
I did some moose
Well,
hunting.
so other than your
There wasn't a lot of moose sign around where I was, but farther down the beach, that was like well, it wasn't just mine. It was all the animals' highway, right? Because the area was
yeah,
so thick and swampy. All the animals took the beach that was like the road, and then farther enough down, you'd see some moose tracks. I don't know how they get through those bushes because they're gigantic animals, but you would just see tracks like coming out of the river, going up the beach straight into the willows, and you're like, I can't get through those willows without struggling. Like, how did this giant moose get through those things? And then their tracks just disappear into the swamp, and you're like, or into the marsh, and you're like, I don't know where it went. And I saw one good set of tracks, and I called. I did quite a bit of calling for moose out there, but never got any replies.
yeah. The watching them go through the marsh. I saw one spot in a marshy area out there where there was a little bit of moose sign, but it's so hard to tell where I was at with the moss. It was so hard to tell how old anything was.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, because I went walking through that marsh and I was sinking up halfway up my shins,
Yeah.
and I'm a 300-pound person. Imagine how, and my foot is spread out. So a moose, imagine how deep that they're sinking into this stuff, and they just mosey on through it. Like
Doesn't seem to affect them at all. Doesn't slow
Yeah.
down. But yeah. And that's the best place
amazing.
to look for moose, is those like sort of grassy, marshy areas. They love that, it's like the perfect territory for moose up there.
Have you taken a moose before?
No, I've never really tried. No, there's some here, not many, but I don't maybe I don't know even where I would look, honestly. But like I've seen a few at like a couple provincial parks, but we can't hunt there. But yeah,
Like my dream animal.
We got a lot of elk here, which is nice, and like whitetail and mule deer, but we don't have any.
Yeah.
And then and like I said, there are moose here, but
what I hear about the whitetail up north, they're huge compared to the whitetails down here.
They are a bit bigger, yeah.
Yeah. There was a guy that came down, and I was talking to him, and he said that he saw a whitetail on the side of the road, and he thought it was a dog. He said, I thought somebody's dog was out there. I said, come on, they're a little bit bigger than that, but he said, no, they're just tiny down here.
Yeah.
It's like the farther south you go, the smaller they get.
Yeah, it seems to be more of them down there, though. That's the thing. Like they're bigger here, but there's fewer.
There is a lot of them here.
I'm always surprised by like I see hunting videos online, people down in the United States, and it's like they're allowed. Like I don't know how many you can take there, but some people are like shooting 2 or 3, and it's like you're allowed 3. That's crazy.
This year, starting bow season this year, you're allowed 10 antlerless and 2 antlered.
Oh wow! Oh
yeah. It's a big bag limit there.
That's pretty big, yeah. I think it might be.
Yeah.
I know whitetail. It might be 2. I'm not entirely sure, but 1 antlered in September. There's a bow season that's antlered, and then I think there's one at the end of December that's like an anything season for bow only. I don't usually hunt during rifle season because I don't know. It's
now, about 5 or 6 years ago, see, we're allowed to hunt over corn down here and everything. Like we can have plots and any kind of bait. That happened about 5 or 6 years ago, and they also introduced about 5 or 6 years ago, around the same time, whatever, every day, either sex days.
Oh yeah,
and it's been that way. Yeah, it's been that way since, because we're just so overpopulated. For a long time, there was a lack of hunters.
Oh, really?
Just people weren't hunting. I don't know why, but people just stopped deer hunting, and so the population just grew insane over the course of 3 or 4 years, and then they said, hey, everybody's got to cut these things down.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, especially because like we've killed all the wolves and everything that would normally prey on them, so there's nothing to keep them in check, right?
Yeah. Basically, all we have down here, main predator wise, is coyotes.
Yeah.
And they'll take a sick one, or they'll take a couple of fawns, but it's not enough to people hunt coyotes more down here than they do deer. I don't know why. People are crazy.
Yeah, it's not something I've tried. I might.
Yeah, no.
Someday maybe try trapping some, but yeah, I don't know. Deer, they're more fun to hunt because they're prey animals, right? So their instincts are tuned to like not be hunted.
Yeah.
You get like a coyote or a wolf or something, they're like, yeah, there's a guy over there, who cares?
Yeah, I'm gonna walk right by them.
And deer have like, the ones that survive are like the ones that can hear the best and see the best, right? So it's like, they're so much harder to hunt it, especially if you hunt with like a bow. Like I'll hunt with my bow, and it's like you have to get 20 yards, 30 yards at the most away from a deer. For me, my skill level, but so sneaking up on an animal that is like designed to know that you're there is so fun.
Yeah, it's a whole different challenge, especially with a trad bow.
Yeah,
it's a lot more fun. Compound bow, I mean that's like having a rifle that shoots an arrow. They
can go pretty far.
Oh yeah, you can hit them from a stretch. around here, I usually hunt in a tree stand. I'll do some spotting stalks with my bow, but I usually hunt in a tree stand because the woods are so thick around here. It's real dense hardwoods and then real dense pine thickets, and they'll come right out. There'll be 5 or 6 of them right on you before you even know it, and then you have to time when to move because
Yeah,
like you said, they're prey animals. So when one of them's eating, the other one's looking around.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're onto you. That's how they work, right? That's how they survive. So it's like, yeah, they're
yep.
so hard. And that's why I like hunting them rather than anything else, because it's like it's the hardest thing to hunt. Sometimes, if I don't shoot one, whatever, it's still fun.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Even if, like you say, even if you don't shoot them, just having one come close enough to even try to shoot is awesome.
Yeah.
With a
Just
rifle around here, you can just knock them down all day long. But with a bow, it's your adrenaline gets pumping and everything, just waiting, and then it's a
my
whole
daughter
different
came up
story.
with me end of December. They do a bow only whitetail season for like a week, and I didn't know about it until like the last couple of days. I didn't even know it was a thing. So I took my daughter with me one day, and I was asked her if she wanted to take the day off school and come out with me, and so she came out with me, and we went out really like you're allowed 1 hour before sunrise. You can get out there, right? So we were out there like 4:30, waiting for the sun to come up, or waiting for the hour before sunrise, and then we headed out. We found some tracks and we followed them for a while, and we spooked a really big buck. He was lying. I didn't even know it was there. We kind of like stared at each other, and we're like, he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, and I was just like, what do I do? If I move, he's gone. And then he just got up and took off. But it was like, if I had a rifle, that thing would have been dead. But I had my bow. I didn't even have an arrow knocked on it because I was like, I didn't expect anything to be there, right? So, but it was like so cool. Just like I was like 10, 12 yards away from this like huge buck, and it was just we kind of like looked at each other in the eyes and we're like, hey. And then he took off. He hesitated, but yeah, if I had a rifle, that deer would be in my freezer, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been as fun.
I had a doe sneak up on me one time. I was actually sitting on the ground, and I was in a ghillie suit. Like I got a leafy ghillie suit for when I hunt on the ground, and I was rifle hunting. And she came up behind me, and I heard her, and I kind of looked behind me like that, and I could see her out of the corner of my eye. And I was waiting on her to turn her head or anything, and it's amazing how they can just stand there and perfectly still staring at you forever.
Yeah.
And I could feel it whenever she spotted me. She started stomping, like she stomped on the ground, and I was close enough to her that I could feel when she was hitting the ground.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was an intense little moment, but long story short, she ran away. There was no way I was going to get that one.
Yeah.
She was on top of me before I even knew she was there.
Yeah, that spot where I saw that buck though, that's where I'm going first next year.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like spend the night in that spot and wait for him to come back. I don't know if he will, but that was the very end of the season. And if I go like day one of bow season, which starts before rifle season, maybe I'll have a chance because no one else will have got him yet.
Yeah, it's amazing that it being at the end of the season that just you walking through there didn't spook him.
Yeah, it
He
was
must not have been.
I was up on a ledge and there was like a bit of a hill, and then there was another ledge, and he was on that bottom one, and we were following the tracks, and they were going straight up the like an old logging road, and we're like, okay, let's see if we can maybe go down and then cut the deer off. But what I didn't know at the time was that the deer had gone up the road, down the hill, and then doubled back. So his tracks were going off in the distance. So I like went over to here to kind of see what the terrain was like over there. He was just right there. And then later on we followed his tracks, and he had gone up the road and then come back. So so we kind of spooked him. I didn't expect him to be there, but it was still a really cool experience. He was a nice big buck. So we'll get him next year.
That's awesome.
Wait for September.
So going back to your alone experience, what was, I know you said it was a hard decision to take your knife or your multi-tool. What was probably the hardest item choice for you besides the knife? What was the other hardest item choice for you? And And what would you have replaced it with if you could, you know?
I think I was debating whether or not I would take my bow, but given all the moose sign that was there and like how much that terrain was like perfectly suited for like moose habitat, I couldn't really turn it down. I think the hardest decision was probably the shovel, and like I said, that was a last minute. Like I was right up to the last minute. I'm like, shovel or axe? I don't know what to take. But the trees were all really small there. There were really a lot of stunted like white spruce and black spruce, and so I thought the shovel could split those easy. I practiced cutting them and splitting with the shovel. They can get through no problem. The axe is useful though. It's good for a lot of things that a shovel can't do. But I think a shovel can do more things than an axe can. Plus, when you're using your shovel or when you're using your axe, I can put that axe in my leg accidentally. My shovel that would hurt, but it wouldn't go into my leg. Like I hit myself on the rubber boot when I was splitting wood, and it deflected off my rubber boot. I was like, well, if that bit of the axe, it would have been in my leg right now. So I hurt myself less with a shovel. That's a plus. And I really wanted to like maybe dig because the ground was really soft and sandy there. So I was hoping I could maybe like incorporate some digging into my shelter. It was too wet, so every time you dug down, it was all wet, and I never ended up doing that. But yeah, the shovel was like right up to the last minute, and the ice, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get through the ice with it, if when it froze for ice fishing. It was a pretty hefty shovel, and I have since, after coming back, taken it ice fishing, and it got through the ice no problem. So I was worrying about that for nothing. So if anyone out there is thinking about taking a shovel, it'll get through the ice and ice fishing no problem.
So the ice, talking about that real quick, because we haven't seen the ice yet. But the river, everybody's talking about how shallow the river is.
It is, yeah, it was quite shallow.
So that ice is going to get pretty thick over that. Was you planning on trying to ice fish one of the lakes over here, or what was you thinking about when you came to ice fishing?
Mostly the river. It was shallow. There was kind of like if you got to the middle of the river, it did have a nice little sort of deeper spot. So you definitely have to go out to the middle to ice fish. And the lakes are kind of hit and miss because they're not like normal lakes, right? They're kettle lakes, which means that they're just like depressions in the ground. And then when the river floods in the spring, they fill up with water, and then they're all like stagnant, basically. There are fish that live in them, but yeah, I don't know. Plus, the one behind me, the one that I named Teapot Pond, was like really shallow, probably only a few feet deep. So that one, I'm not sure. I think everything would have died in the winter. That would have probably been a complete winter kill for that lake for sure. But there were some bigger lakes back there. They're hard to get to because of all the willows, but that would have been easier in the winter as well. But I was just planning on ice fishing the river once it froze up.
Awesome.
Which would have been
awesome. That was a question that I had been wondering myself. I actually had someone ask me on my YouTube channel about it, and I was thinking, well, I don't know how thick the river is going to freeze up there, but moving water doesn't freeze completely, and so on and so forth. But yeah. I'm glad you let me know that in the center it was a lot deeper, because everybody's talking about how shallow it is. But
yeah, you could walk out like pretty far, and it was maybe waist up to your top of your legs, maybe, and then eventually there was a bit of a depression closer to the center. I don't know how deep it was on the other side, but I think it depends also like which way the river is curving and which side of it you're on, because I think it digs out a bit deeper on one side than the other. And yeah, that would have been definitely where I went ice fishing. I'm not sure I would have spent any time in the back lakes, really. I never saw any fish. That water was perfectly clear, but I never saw any movement or any surfacing fish or anything back there.
See, I'm a river rat myself. I was upset when I seen you guys got a river. I said, oh my Lord, why? If I would have had a river, that would have been awesome to have a river. Yeah. I hate lakes. I cannot stand a lake.
It's definitely, you can cover like a lot of water in a river, which is nice if you walk up and down the beach. But that river is also a bit challenging because it's, there's no structure in that river at all. Like there's no eddies, there's no seams, there's no like pockets behind rocks where you can find trout or whatever. It was just like flat and muddy, and it was all the same everywhere. So my fishing strategy with hand lining was just like cast in every direction, do it again, but let it go deeper, and then like take a few steps to the left, and then cast in every direction. You just had to cover water, right? That was your only real chance
Yeah.
of catching fish. Just cover as much volume of water as you can.
With the gill net, I actually brought up a point with the gill net, because I think Michaela said hers was really shallow too. But what would you think about maybe going out knee deep into the water and putting poles in the ground and stretching a gill net across those poles?
Yeah, it depends what was underneath. Like if I had done that at that sandy beach I was telling you about, that I could have done that there. But
Yeah.
where I was, yeah, I don't know if you'd ever get out of that mud.
Suck you down, huh?
Like you see my gill net. I don't know if you'd noticed, but I put mine sort of on a tripod partway out in the river just to get it out deeper. And it's in two pieces. And the first time I set it out, I didn't have that second piece on, and I laid it down in there, and it was just like on the bottom of the river. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. So I added that second piece to get it out a little farther. And I don't know if you could see it, but it was like next to that tripod, there's also like a platform that I had built to stand on. Because if I tried standing on there and lifting up my gill net, I just went straight into the mud. And there's a couple of times where I was like, it was hard to get out of the mud. So I had to build like a little dock kind of thing. Not sure if that showed up on camera.
No, I didn't see that, but that's awesome. Because I mean, that's another thing about this show. You know, there's no man-made anything floating around. You have to come up with a way to keep yourself out of that to make it easier on you. And you have to put the work into building that little platform.
Yeah.
Just to not have to work to keep your legs out of the mud, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, that mud was you get stuck in it. There's a couple times where I got stuck and I had like a stick and I had to like kind of like dig a hole to get some air down there to get my foot out, you know, to break that sort of vacuum seal that happens when you're stuck in the mud. And I was like, it's a good thing this stick was in reach. I didn't bring it with me. It was just happened to be lying there. And I was like, thank goodness this stick was here. I'd been in that mud for 2 days probably. I would have lost my boot forever, one of the two. Yeah. But yeah, the gill net, that took a couple tries to get it set right. And I didn't want to use a dead tree because I had so few of them. So I used like a green tree, but I was worried about it being too heavy for me to lift if I like didn't catch any fish and hadn't eaten for a while. I thought maybe I'd get a little weaker, and so I kept it small. And then that second piece I added was a piece of dry wood because I didn't want it to be too heavy. And man, it was so hard to give up that piece of dry wood because there was so little of it. But I couldn't let my gill net be too heavy.
One good thing is once you have a fire going, you can actually, you can line that wood up around it, and that'll help dry it out once you split it down and stuff or whatever. Especially if it's small, and it'll dry it out pretty quick. But I had a plan for my gill net whenever I went out there. I'm used to stuff around here where there's a limb hanging over the water or something like that. And so what I was going to do was I was going to lash my poles together, put my gill net out there, and then on the end of my gill net, I was going to have paracord running up to a tree or another limb, and that way I could kind of reach up and grab the cord and pull down on it.
Right.
And that way maybe the end of it will pick up a little bit and I could kind of swing it. Right. But once I got out there, it was, I don't know, 40 yards from the water to a decent tree. I was like, I can't do that. That's just too much. But you got to get it out there.
Yeah. And, the river wasn't that wide anyway. So I wasn't really worried about it not being far enough out. So it worked.
That's another good thing about a river. Over on those lakes, so I don't know about the river that y'all were at. I've never been there, but the rivers around here. A lake, like that lake that we were on, Reindeer Lake.
Yeah.
I put a baited line out in the water and it stayed there for 4 days. Okay. And when I pulled it back in, it still had the bait on it.
All right.
And it blew my mind. I said, there's no way. There was never any big fish that came up close to shore at night or anything like that. Out here, people go bow fishing at night, and because there's these monster fish that just come up to the side of the shore, or the side of the bank, whatever, in the middle of the night and just troll around and do their thing. But out there, you go out there with your headlamp on, and there was nothing. It was terrible.
It's a lot of water, and it's probably way deeper than the river, so it's like so much volume of water you have to cover. The river was definitely good for fishing. Those The pike
Yeah.
were like, I knew they'd be easy to catch with bait. I wasn't sure if the gill net would work, but those pike, I don't think they get a lot of food there, so they aggressively go for whatever they see.
Yeah. What kind of bait fish were out there? I mean, everybody's pulling in these pike. How many pike did you catch? Altogether, how many pike did you catch?
I caught 7 pike altogether and 1 burbot. Yeah.
7 pike. That's
Yeah.
that's crazy. 7 pike. And everybody's catching these pike. What kind of bait fish were out there?
There was Arctic grayling out there, and you see William catching those little fish, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I have no idea what those were. I never saw any of those, or no, I don't know. And
Yeah, I can't remember what he called them. I don't know. That was pretty cool the way he smacked the water.
Yeah, that was crazy. He's just like beating fish with a stick. I was like, I don't know you can do that.
You can take a boat paddle. A boat paddle works really great.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I've done that. I've done that before. A little flat bottom boat, take a boat paddle and smack the water right there next to the little fish. And you can just reach down and grab them real quick. They're still alive, you know.
Yeah.
You can reach down and grab them and throw them in a bucket and use them for bait later.
Yeah, that's not something I would have thought of, I don't think, but that's something I've never done before. But yeah, I never saw any little fish like that. All I saw was the pike. I know there's grayling and inconu is another kind of fish, but I never saw any of those. And pike and burbot, and yeah, there's no salmon or anything there, I don't think. So, but I don't know what the pike
The
eats.
pike and burbot's what mattered, ain't it?
Yeah, the burbots especially, they're super nice and oily fish. They taste good. The pike is not really that great. Once you get over the slime they're covered in, and you're like, okay, this is gross. And then, but yeah, every pike I caught, like I tried to see what they were eating. Every single pike I caught had a completely empty stomach. So I don't know what they were eating, but I couldn't find it. I was thinking maybe that would help me with something. I don't know, but if I was lure fishing, then I would like match whatever was in their stomach, right? Or color wise, or pattern wise. Or if I was fly fishing, I'd be like, okay, this belly is full of whatever, so I'll use that fly. But like 100% of them were completely empty stomach.
Wow, that's crazy. So yeah, they were hungry.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, no wonder they eat like I figured I'd have to do something way more complicated to catch them. But at orientation camp, we were just like throwing the hook with meat on it in the river, and it would just sit on the sand on the bottom, and like the pike were gobbling it up. I'm like, well, I thought that was going to be more complicated. I didn't know I'd just throw meat into the river and catch fish with it, and while it's sitting on the bottom. I don't know you can catch pike like that, but apparently you can. Burbot, I know you catch like that, but I didn't know you catch pike like that.
That's awesome though.
Yeah, I think it was Tim who like he grabbed the breakfast sausage from the buffet and threw a chunk of it out into the river and caught a pike on it, and I was like, what?
That's awesome. Oh, the buffet. You're talking about boot camp, right? Or not boot camp, but base camp.
Yeah.
How was base camp? Did you enjoy base camp?
Yeah, that was amazing. I absolutely loved the orientation camp. Like I would do that like every year. Like it was just hanging out with people who like do stuff that I do, and I can talk about stuff that I do, and no one thinks it's weird. And we're just like sharing stories, sitting around the fire, and everyone's like so unique and interesting, right? Like I was saying before, I don't know a lot of people that are really into the bushcraft and survival thing. So just finding a group of people that like you share these common interests with, and you can like talk about things that normal people don't know, or that would find weird. You're talking about like case skinning a snowshoe hare, and everyone's like, oh yeah, not like, ooh, gross. Like, yeah, it was just so cool. Even the production people, they're all cool to hang out with and meet and get to know them. And yeah, it was just like, it was like chill. It was like camp for grown-ups. It was so fun.
Oh man, the Super Boy Scouts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was, and the food was amazing. I don't know who that chef is, but man, they're good.
Oh yeah.
They feed you.
Yeah, they kept us full too. It's like every time they would call you down there to the tent or whatever, it was like, here's a massive amount of meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's some cereal over here, but here's a bunch of meat, and there's
Yeah, and I think we dropped some hints, and they were like, I think we were like, man, could you go for some mac and cheese out here? And then like next day it was just like mac and cheese on the buffet, and we're like, yes. So they were paying attention to our conversations and like
Yeah,
hearing all the food we were talking about.
they tried to make us some fried chicken because
Yeah,
I was telling everybody about fried chicken and stuff. They made us some fried chicken.
that's
Uh,
awesome. They're cool.
yeah.
Yeah, it was super fun.
What was your favorite part about orientation? Like if you could just take 30 minutes of that orientation and say this was my favorite time, what would that have been?
I think after everything was done and we were just had some free time, right? And we were playing this sort of like game called Kung, which is like throwing sticks at like other sticks, basically. That's what we do for fun. We throw sticks at other sticks. We were just like chilling and hanging out and just sitting around the fire and playing Cub and talking. And Dusty, he would just like man, that guy, he needs his own show. He's so interesting. He's got all the best stories. He would just tell stories that he'd do that like that laugh that he does. It was just like it was so cool. It was just so fun, just hanging out, hearing all everyone's stories, and yeah, it was and just playing Cub.
Haven't got to speak with Dusty yet, but I can't wait.
Yeah, he's a cool dude.
Just hearing what he says and stuff, me and him, I think me and him's got a lot in common.
Yeah, I think you guys will get along great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we both. It's the redneck thing, is what it is.
Yeah, he's so fun. I hope they like watch his videos and they're like, yeah, we're gonna have like the Dusty Show on History Channel now because he can
Show, that would be
all
so
his experiences and stories could fill up his own TV show, no problem.
That is awesome. The Dusty Show.
Yeah, I'd watch it for sure.
Oh wow, I would watch that. Uh oh man, I just had a question I was going to ask you and then I forgot. Gosh, it's been a long day.
Yeah, it's a hot one. You guys having a heat
Oh
dome?
yeah, it's been warm. It's been really warm. It's like 98 degrees here today.
Yeah, we got to 38 Celsius, which is like about 100 exactly today,
Yeah,
which is
that's
really hot
insane.
here. Cool.
Okay, so after the base camp, or after the base camp orientation, what was your drop day like? What was going through your head on drop day? When were you dropped? Like what order were you dropped in, and what time of day? You know?
Yeah. Well, we started like probably before the sun came up. It was probably like 4:30. I think they had us wake up, maybe 5 at the latest, and
Oh yeah, they're mean about it.
then we did all those like all that footage with like the cool like lit up tents and the helicopter flybys and all that cool stuff. And then yeah, we had all our gear. They still had all our gear at that time, right? And we never got to see it again until we got to our site. Um, it was I don't know. It was like one of those things where you're like up to that point, you know that you're on the show, but you haven't actually got out there yet. So like, it's still not really real that you're like on the show. And then that hits you. That's a whole other story when you land and you're like, oh yeah, I'm really here. But I was dropped last, so I got to see everyone else go out. And I was kind of like hanging out by the helicopter, and everyone's leaving one by one, and it's just like, well, I'm gonna go soon. And then it's probably it was probably like 4:30 ish, 5 o'clock in the afternoon when by the time it was late in the day when I got out there.
Wow, that's
It was a
late.
long process. Yeah. And they dropped us, everyone took the helicopter out and yeah, that was my first time in a helicopter, so that was cool. And never been in a helicopter before. So yeah, just sitting there waiting and you're just like the countdown's there and you're like kind of just you're not really nervous, but you're kind of like you're not sure what to expect, right? And I don't really get like nervous really, but you know, you get on that helicopter and it's like there's cameras following you. And I think drop day was the first day it really felt like a TV show because they're getting these directions. They're like, hey, stand here. And they're like, camera comes by and they're like, hey, turn to the right and then walk 3 steps. And they're like, okay, do it again with this other camera. And the director's yelling at us instructions for all those cool shots of like the glowing tents and everything. And that's what it felt like. That's when it really started to like, okay, I'm on like a TV show now. This is really cool. And like people are gonna see this. And up to that, it just felt like camp, and we were hanging out and doing like survival and talking and telling stories and stuff. And then that was like, now it's like, okay, yeah, this is like a real show that we're a part of. And that was a bit unnerving, I think.
finally starts to hit.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, this is real. I've committed to this, and you're like, yeah.
I think that moment was when man, I can't remember his name, but the photographer
Yeah,
that comes out and they're like, did you bring your bow? Do you have an axe? What'd you bring with you? We're gonna take pictures of you and so on and so forth. And
yeah,
I was like, I've never had my picture taken before,
yeah. Well, man, my
especially yeah.
my pictures
So
were like, he came by, and I was like, I was just fishing. We were waiting for like an interview to start or whatever. So I was just like, I was wearing my big boy pants, and I had like my fleece sweater on, and I was just like casting some spoons because I brought a bunch of different colored spoons to see what would work, so I could match my paracord to it.
yeah.
And I was casting with just some of the spoons, and he's like, "Hey, can I take your picture?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." I just figured he was like warming up or something, right? I'm just wearing like my old worn out like fleece sweater. It's got like elbows are like all threadbare. You can kind of see through. It was just like my comfy sweater I was wearing. And so he's like, okay, do some fishing and then look off into the distance. And then he's like, okay, like pretend you're like doing something with your fishing rod. And one of my pictures was me just like pulling line out of my fishing rod, looking at it. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like I'm never. And then I'm like, okay, well we'll do the real pictures later. And then no, those are my actual pictures. I'm looking at all my like official like loan photos, and I'm like, I didn't know those were going to be my actual pictures. I would have done something cool. Mine is just like me, like standing in the river, staring off into the distance. Everyone else is like got their axe and their bow, and they look really sweet. Or, I think it's Tim's. He's like crouched down in the forest. He's got like his bow in his hand, like he's stalking an animal, and I'm just like, just standing in the water. That was my picture. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh man.
I mean, they still turned out good, but it was just like I don't know, had something cool or like at least wore like my cool blue sweater or something, and it was just just wearing my dirty pants and like my my worn out fleece sweater. It was kind of funny.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought
Yeah,
he was
kind of crappy that they didn't let you grab your bow or something like that. He
yeah,
said, I was just out there in my comfy sweater.
yeah. I was like wasn't wearing any of the stuff I actually took on the show with me, so it's kind of funny.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, it was just like, well, I guess these are my photos now.
What tent were you in? You was talking about the tent lit up and stuff. What tent were you in?
I was in number 12 at the very end.
Number
It-
12.
Yeah, I don't think
Wow,
they
number
assigned us tents.
12.
We just kind of picked tents, and I was like
Yeah.
slowly waddling around, and I was just the slowest one, and I got the last tent. So I've had a lot of people
They,
ask if I was like an alternate because I was in tent 12, but yeah, they were just randomly assigned tents.
they that's what they told us. They said, hey, pick a tent. They didn't come up and say, hey, you're gonna be in tent number 5, but tent number 4. Let me step back on this. Whenever we got off the plane at base camp, the little puddle jumper plane that we were on,
Yeah,
it was the wind would cut you in half. I had on a tank top and I was freezing. Yeah.
yeah,
And so when they finally told us, hey, you can pick your I picked tent number 4 because it was right beside the firewood.
yeah.
So I said, this one's mine. I'm going tent
You're,
number 4 is mine.
you're smarter than everyone. That's why. It's like
I
in,
was
in
colder
jiu-jitsu.
than everybody.
Yeah, like in jiu-jitsu class, there's like we have a big fan, right? And like I tell people like when you go to a jiu-jitsu club, don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Just look where the fan is, and that's the spot of the mats you train.
Yes,
Just work smart on
exactly
it.
right.
Just find the fan, and that's your spot. You don't leave that spot. But yeah, I got 10, 12, and we were divided into two. So like half of us got there the day before, and then the other half arrived my day. So there was already like half the people already there when my crew got there, and then so the
Oh
first like
wow.
6 tents were already taken.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, they
Because we
staggered.
all got there at the same time, but I guess y'all are a little farther north than we were.
I think it's yeah. I mean, they had like a boat to take us, so maybe they couldn't fit us all in the boat, so they probably
Yeah.
separated over 2 days. Hmm. And yeah,
Uh going back to drop day, we didn't get to see you. You said you were dropped late. and we didn't get to see what you did on your first day.
Yeah.
So was there, what, can you take us over your first day there? What happened whenever you first got dropped?
Yeah, the first thing I did, I wanted to get my temporary shelter up like as soon as possible because pretty much every night during orientation camp it rained, like almost every night. So I'm like, it's gonna rain tonight, probably, almost certainly. So I just wanted to get my stuff out of the rain, and I wanted to get as much like dry tinder and branches as I could find, and like get them in my shelter so they would get rained on. And then I set up my tarp to catch rainwater because I like that's free water. Might as well. I don't have to boil the rainwater. So I set up my tarp to catch the rainwater. And then I spent the rest of the day just scouting. And I really wanted to get my permanent shelter like started immediately. So I was looking for a permanent shelter spot, and I was looking for just resources and tracks and usual stuff to see what was around. And I was really, really hoping to find some birch trees, but I could never find any birch trees where I was. And looking for fire starting stuff like fat wood. I couldn't find any fat wood or any. That whole area floods, right? So anytime any tree dies, the next spring it's gone. Right?
Yeah.
So there was no like leaning spruce trees or anything that I could find, like maybe some resin had dripped to the bottom of or something, or made some fat wood over time because they just disappeared too quick. And couldn't find any birch. Found lots of bear tracks, tons of grizzly tracks. There were so many grizzly tracks. they were everywhere. And yeah, the first day I just get my temporary shelter set up, and then tried to sort of just to get familiar with the place and look for fire making stuff and animal sign, and just see what was easy to get to, right, without a lot of effort.
Yep.
Just there were some game trails I followed for a bit. The game trails would always like disappear into the willows, and you're like, it's a pretty well packed game trail, so I don't know what's going through those willows, but like, I don't know how it got through them. But I think like in the early spring, they're up higher where my shelter was, and then once the water recedes, they just walk along the river. So those willows probably like grew up in the meantime. They probably weren't literally that thick in like the early spring, late winter when those game trails were packed down. But yeah, so I followed those around and just kind of gotta sort of lay of the land, look for some berry patches and berries. There were so many berries there, man. It was awesome. They were everywhere. And yeah, that was the first day. And the first day was like, it had a lot going through my mind for sure. It was you land and it kind of hits you that you're like on alone. And the survival stuff is like, okay, like I do that all the time. That's not really a problem. But like alone is a big deal. It's a big show. It's thousands of people apply to be on the show, but you somehow made it through this process and you're on the show, and that's like, it has a lot of responsibility, and it's, I don't think people understand how much that weighs on you when you're out there. Like you definitely go through the head, like, why was I chosen, and am I going to be able to do this? Was it the right decision to come out here? And even though we had all those talks with my kids and my wife about like them wanting me to be out there, just still in the back of your mind, you're like, they need me at home, even though it's only going to be a couple of months. It's not really a big deal in the grand scheme of like their lifetimes. But your brain is searching for things that are like wrong, right?
Yeah.
Your instincts tell you to like do things that are easy and relax, and then you're like, you get there and you're like, it dawns on you just how much work you have to do, and how you have items, you have a saw and a shovel and a knife and stuff, but that's it. You don't have anything else. There's no everything else you have to make or find or build, right? And it's that sheer volume of work that people who haven't spent a lot of time bushcrafting, or they go camping but they bring their tent, right? They don't know how much effort it takes to even build a simple like lean-to shelter. Like it takes work, it takes time, it takes energy. And yeah, you're just like, and I was like that for like the whole first day. And the next day when I started on my permanent shelter and like got to work, then that went away completely. But like when it was just me scouting around and setting up my temporary shelter, it was like, all those things are going through your head. And once I got to work, I was fine.
Do you think it was like, would you call it drop shock, or was it just a moment where you had to, you just kind of wanted to focus in, or because a lot of people ask about drop shock. I didn't experience drop shock to my knowledge. You
Yeah.
know, there were thoughts and doubts, of course,
Mhm.
but it wasn't one of those things where I just sat down and just really started thinking about it. So was this more, would you call it drop shock, or was it more of just kind of thinking to try to prioritize?
Yeah, I don't know if it would really be drop shock. I mean, I don't know, technically know what drop shock is, but was I was
I
like,
guess it's different for
I don't know.
everybody.
It did take a while to like realize what, you know, like I had priorities in my head like for months leading up to this, what I was going to do as soon as I got there. And then, yeah, so I don't know. I guess I would probably say, yeah, it was drop shock. You know, it was like you're kind of second guessing yourself and you're like kind of overwhelmed by like the whole idea of not just the work priorities and survival priorities, but like, you know, the responsibility of creating a TV show, which is like huge. Like people watching it, like it's easy to separate the survival and the filmmaking process when you're watching it because you don't see the filmmaking process, right? You don't see the editing, you don't see any of that. But you know, when you're experiencing it, it's like, you know, I have to do it, but I also have to make it look good for TV, and I don't know what it's going to look like on TV. That's all going through your head too, right? So yeah, I'm going to say yes for drop shock. I mean, I've never done it before, so I've never had drop shock before, so I don't know for certain,
That's
but
exactly right. It's
probably.
so hard for somebody to say, oh, I'm experiencing. Drop shock wasn't even a thing until season 2,
Yeah,
you know. So it's still brand new. Nobody knows. I mean, there's no definition of what it is. It's just if you say that you felt drop shock, then you felt drop shock. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, exactly.
uh,
It's just like
I
that
like how you
ending
brought up
that's
the TV show aspect of it,
that
because
was
I
a big
actually
ongoing like issue that I had personally. Like Alone is an important show to me. Like it's not just out there trying to make money. It's also like it's like the best TV show ever, man. I love it. I watch it. I watched every episode. You know, it's like, you know, it's being selected for the show is like it's a huge honor, and it's, you know, I didn't take it lightly. And yeah, it's something that I thought about a lot. Like, yeah, you have to film stuff, but I also didn't want to film stuff like poorly. So like, you know, I wanted everything to be like these good camera angles and be like, oh, I did these camera angles when I was fishing last time, so I'm going to do different ones this time. And you know, that was a big part of it for me.
so being on the show now, and even through your like casting tapes and stuff, uh it's it's hard to explain. I try to tell everybody, no matter what you do, if you cook your dinner, it takes 3 times longer because you're filming it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah,
so much harder because you're trying to get this camera angle. It's like, oh no, that one might not be right because I moved. So you got to adjust
yeah,
this, or and it makes everything so much harder. It is
yeah.
so easy to go out, cut a log, and split that log with no
Mhm.
camera. It takes minutes. But once there's a camera on you, it's a 30-minute ordeal to get that one log split up just the way you want it to, with the right angles and stuff like that.
Right,
So it
yeah.
just makes everything
And,
harder.
and then when you take that firewood to your fire, you got to reset everything. And,
Yeah.
and there's also the
Yes, that's
pressure, like,
exactly right.
you know, like it's easy to do stuff, and then you probably not even just in survival or fire lighting or whatever. It's like anything you do, it's then someone starts watching you and you like can't do it. You know,
Yeah.
like that happens all the time for like so many things. And like, okay, everyone is like, this camera is pointing at me, like I better do this properly. Like,
Yeah.
and that makes you think about everything like in a different way as well. It's like like that first fire I lit, man, that was an interesting thing because I was just
Yeah, I
like,
was going
that
to
was the
ask you about
first,
that first fire.
like I filmed like building my temporary shelter and everything. My memory card had an error on it, so I think that's why they didn't show any, because it was the memory card that had my whole shelter building process.
Oh,
And then when I
nice.
went to like film one more thing on it later, it gave me an error, and I was like, oh, okay, that's my whole shelter. So I don't think they had
Wow.
any of that footage. But like, so that fire was like the first real thing that I filmed myself like survivally doing, and the first survivally thing I doing it. And it was early in the morning, and I just wanted to get it out of the way so I could go do other stuff. So I'm glad they showed it, because like it's a great example of how, you know, you shouldn't be like in a hurry. When you're in a hurry to do things and you rush through them, you make mistakes that are dumb that you don't normally make. And that fire is a perfect example of that. Like I had all material I needed for the fire. I didn't have nearly enough lichen for the tinder. That it grew in these little tiny clumps. And you had to like pinch them off the tree, and it took so long to get a little bunch of it. And I was like pulling this off for so long. It felt like so long anyway. And finally, I had like this tiny little handful. I'm like, oh, it's good enough. I just want to get this fire over with. And then, and I was a bit of a rush. And another thing is like my ferro rod. I don't know if you noticed, but there was like some pretty terrible ferro rod technique in that fire. It's okay to make fun of me because it was funny. And my ferro rod came with a striker. We were allowed to take the striker, and the striker was originally attached with like this leather cord, right? But they made me take the leather cord off, and I cut off a piece of my pink paracord and I put it on. But it was like a little piece of pink paracord. And I'm like, I'll fix that later. I don't care. I don't want to use all my paracord right now for this because it still had all the strands inside, and I didn't want to like cut off a piece of like a chunk this big that I can't use for anything else, right? Yeah. And then I was such in a hurry to get that fire going that I didn't like remember that I had done that or notice that I had done that. So I was trying to like strike my ferro rod, but my striker would only move like 2 inches down the ferro rod because that piece of paracord was so small. And I was like, this little tiny, I'm like, come on. And I'm making like the worst ferro rod sparks ever. Like there's no way that fire was gonna start. Like but and I was glad I realized that and like took a step back and I was like, yeah, I'll do this later. And I had like a solid liter of water from the rainwater thing that I built, but like, yeah, eventually I took that paracord off because I realized what was happening, and then just started using the saw, my Leatherman, to get the sparks good. But yeah, you can't like, it looks, you watch me, you see tons of sparks, which, you know, if you haven't used a ferro rod before, you know, you don't want tons of sparks, you want big sparks, right? You want like the meaty sparks that are going to stay lit when they hit your tinder. You know, it looks impressive that it's shooting sparks everywhere, but they're not going to catch anything on fire. So I couldn't, I couldn't strike all the way down the ferro rod because that little piece of paracord I tied my striker to was so stupid. But you know, I'm just like sitting there making this like this nice light show with the sparks, but they're never going to catch anything on fire. But yeah, it was. I saw that, and I was like, man, I look like I've never lit a fire before. And it was,
no, you could tell that you knew what you were doing. They're not going to let. First of all, they're not going to let somebody on the show that just does not know how to build a fire. You know,
yeah, I hope not.
They're not going to. Their whole thing is that you have to be safe out there, and they're not going to let you go without a fire. But you could tell just by the way you had everything set up around you that you really do know what you're doing.
Yeah,
anybody that has ever built a fire like that could look at your setup and say, okay, yeah, he's got this. But that lichen is really hard to catch sometimes.
It is. And it was pretty damp there too. So
yeah, and but you were talking about you had to take off the little tufts. Where I was at, I could take it by the handful.
Yeah, I know. Same here. Like, you can find like 3-foot long strands of it coming out of the trees here, and it dries out real fast. But the humidity was so high there that it never really dried. Even when I'd leave it out in the sun, and then the next day I'd go to use it, and it was like already wet again. Same with feather sticks. That first day I made a ton of feather sticks because I'm like, I'm just gonna sit down while my water's boiling. I'm just gonna make a bunch of feather sticks so they're ready for the next fire. And then when I went to use them, they're all like damp. So I had to make fresh ones every time. All those people with birch bark. And then I see like, I watched the episode and I see like Jake making craft projects out of birch bark. And I'm like, oh man, wish I had some birch bark. I've got enough to like do arts and crafts with. I don't even have enough to get a fire with. Like, I was sort of like, yeah, you can giving up my shovel just for some birch bark, man.
It's crazy because whenever we was dropped, I saw birch everywhere. And then the spot that they put me in, it was nothing but black spruce.
Yeah.
I found one birch tree out there, and I started, and there was a couple of dead ones around that I robbed really fast, but they've been dead and gone for a while. But there was one little birch tree that's got 3 little trees that grew like this out of it, but it was like a 45-minute walk away from my shelter. So every time I went that way, I made sure I filled up my pocket full of this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But the lichen was really easy to get a hold of. But anyways, that first fire he was talking about, the striker.
Yeah.
I don't like using strikers too much. I mean, you can, and people don't understand. A lot of people don't know that there's like 8 or 9 different tools on that one little striker.
Yeah.
But we were allowed to take a striker. I never used one. I didn't even bring one with me to orientation because I never used one. And then they were like, yeah, you're allowed to use a striker or whatever they were talking about it. And I said, man, that would have been another tool that I could have used. And Wyatt wound up giving me one. And I found a round file. Somebody had a round file. And I took the little can opener part of the scraper. I filed it into a gut hook.
Oh, yeah.
Because we weren't allowed to have a gut hook on our knife.
That's
and
right.
So I was going to use that as a gut hook to clean my fish. And never caught a fish though, but whatever. But I've never really liked using the scrapers because I don't know. I had more control over it with the back of the knife.
Yeah. I switched
Yeah.
over to using like on the Leatherman, the saw blade. The back of that saw is like it's got a really nice 90-degree angle. And I sharpened. I filed it down a bit before going to make it sharper.
Yeah.
But I was just worried because like that saw takes a lot of material off your ferro rod, which is good for lighting a fire. But I know the striker will take less material off, so I was hoping that would work because then my ferro rod wouldn't like wear out as fast. But when that wasn't really working, so then I switched to using my saw blade on my Leatherman, which works way better. It just wears it out faster.
Oh man, did you have the 6-inch by half-inch ferro rod?
Yeah, it was the biggest one we could take.
Yeah, those things last forever.
Yeah,
I'm talking about forever. The one that I took on a loan, I still use it. And it's been 2 years, and I still use it from time to time. So those things last forever. You was talking about how you had started building your permanent shelter. Where did you get the idea for that shelter? Was it the natives? Did you speak with the natives there?
Well, once I found out where we were going, the first thing I wanted to do was like just figure out what they built. Like the people who have lived there for they've lived there for thousands of years, so they've obviously developed shelters that work for that climate, right? And so I was looking online mostly, and I found this. It was like a article of like some engineering journal about like Arctic shelters and different styles and how they were built, and that's kind of where I got the idea for that one from. And it was, I knew it was going to be easy to build, calorie wise, and time wise too. It only took a couple days, and it was pretty much done. And I didn't even have to kill the bed. I cut down some trees for the bed, but like the shelter itself, I just cut like living like branches off the alder trees and the willows. So like you didn't even have to like damage anything to get that shelter built, which I thought was cool because you don't want to deforest the place building your shelter, which a lot of people I think do. But and it was like super simple, and I wanted to be small. Like I could sit up straight in it, and I built it about 8 inches taller than me sitting up on my bed. Like I built the bed first, and then I built the shelter around it because I figured it easier to do it in that order. And so I built it about 8 inches taller because I figured if it's got some snow on it, it'll sag a bit. But I just wanted to be able to sit up straight. I didn't care about standing up. I mean, it's if it was like a house I lived in permanently, then I'd want to stand up in it. But it was a temporary permanent shelter that I needed for a couple months, and so I was okay just sitting up in it as long as I can lay down and stretch out, and I could stretch my arms out inside if I laid in the middle. It was about 8 by 6 feet by about 6 feet. It was perfect size for that, and it took like no time to build, and I could use my shovel to like cut all the branches off and sharpen them pretty easy. And it was also like portable. Like I could have like lifted the whole thing up and then like moved it somewhere if I wanted to. I never did, but it was like like when you pick up your tent at the end of camping and you like lift it up and like shake it out, it was kind of like that. Like I could have like theoretically just lifted it up and moved it if I needed to. It was that light, and it just used so little.
Just shout out for anybody that might go on the show at a later time.
Yeah.
That's a perfect ice fishing shelter too. If
exactly.
You can pick it up from where you're at and walk it out onto the ice. There you go.
Yeah, and that was sort of another thing I had like in mind is like, well, not picking my shelter up, but building another one that I can move around on the ice, because it's once you tie it all together, it's like it's almost like if you've ever made a willow basket, it's almost like a willow basket upside down, and you can just pick it up and move it. So yeah, the plan was maybe to build like a smaller like ice fishing shack using the same style. And yeah, it was super fast and super easy. And it's the only downside to that shelter that I found was trying to cover that dome shape with a rectangle shaped tarp because it's like it would fold over and then the corners would be on the ground. So I never got to the point where I sealed it in because it was too humid. So I kept it open for the airflow. Eventually, I would have had to seal it up, right, when I started.
Oh yeah.
But I would have had to like cut the corners off my tarp and like patch them onto the thing, and then patch some spots with moss because of my rectangle tarp doesn't really go over a dome shape very well. So that was one negative. And I lost my rainwater catchment too by using the dome shape because my temporary shelter was like a triangle. So one side was up and the other side was like this angle. So like this had a nice rainwater catchment, but I lost that building the dome. So that was a negative too. I tried using my raincoat to catch water, but it didn't catch it off.
Yeah. Well, eventually that rainwater is not going to be there anyways. It'll be snow. Yeah. So looking at the future, just staying warm.
Yeah, and again, like hindsight is always 2020, right? Like I should have stayed in that temporary shelter for like a week before moving into the permanent one. Plus, I built that one on the moss, so it was way more comfortable to sleep on. My bed was so hard, man. It was so hard to get through.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the whole not sleeping too well.
Oh yeah.
Did that start pretty quick? Was that like first night, second night?
The first night was okay, and then second night was a bit less, and then like it got less. And a lot of that was like, it's all my own fault, obviously, for like stressing out about things I shouldn't. But I would lie in bed and instead of sleeping, I would be, thinking about, what I was going to do the next day, which is normal. But then I was also adding on like, how am I going to film that? And like, what am I going to say when I'm talking to the camera, or like, what would people want to see of this place, or like what's something cool that I've seen out here that I should show more? And there's like that additional stress, and that was a huge stress for me. Just the whole like the idea of like knowing that I need to film everything and wanting to do it well and wanting to show like new stuff all the time. And so that kept me up a bit. And then also like just making sure I was up in time to do my check-in in the morning. That was because we couldn't have our yellow brick in the shelter because the tarp would block the signal, so we had to have it outside our shelter, right? And I was so paranoid about like not hearing that little beep in the morning, the check-in reminder, and missing it, and having like everyone come out and be like, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then I was worried. Like
I had them coming out on me one day. It was when the mice first started moving into my shelter.
Yeah.
And I stayed up all night because they were running across my face.
Oh, geez.
They were like trying to get in my sleeping bag, and I would lay there. I had my head propped up on my bag or whatever, and there's one right here looking at me, and so they kept me up all night long. And so I missed my check-in the next morning, and then here comes Cable and the guys, and I hear a boat. The boat wakes me up, and I said, "What are they doing here?" And I looked at I looked at the little thing, and it showed where they had sent the message. I said, "Oh my God!" So I jump up. I'm half dressed. I throw my boots on. I go out. I'm like, "Hey man, I'm fine."
Yeah. I was so worried. I was like, I was kind of like, if they come out to like, if I miss too many check-ins, like, what am I gonna like? They're gonna tell me to go home. Like, I was so worried about that. Yeah, it's one of the things I like stressed out about that I shouldn't have. But it's funny, like some of the things that caused me to like get to the point where I left were like things I was worrying about. Like I was so worried about like making sure that I stayed out there. That these stresses of like wanting to stay out there were like causing me to eventually not stay out there. It's like it's a hard thing to think about, like stressing out about missing check-ins or like doing something wrong was like, no, I don't want to like do something that will jeopardize my chance out here. And then all those stresses were like eventually what sort of led to like me leaving. It's like ironic, I guess, but yeah.
Oh man, it's so amazing. People don't understand the kind of things that go through your mind out there when you're just by yourself. Here in October, it's like 50 degrees,
Yeah.
you know. But there in October, I was so worried. I was constantly thinking, God, I hope they're okay. I hope they're warm, because we burn wood for heat. I had wood out here, but I was
Yeah.
like, man, I hope they're warm. They hadn't even tried to light a fire yet because it's so hot, you know. And I'm up there thinking, God, they're probably freezing to death. And I was just so worried and so stressed out. And he was talking about what am I going to do tomorrow and stuff like that. And it really eats at you. I've got all of this to do, and I've got this that I got to do tomorrow, and then I got to get water, and I'll probably go pick some berries, and I got to make sure I got my bow just in case I see a bird. You know, I'm gonna try to fish. So much on top of everything else, the exhaustion that, and then you when you can't go to sleep, your body can't heal, for one, so your mind can't heal. Yeah,
your brain.
I went
You need sleep
through
for your brain to
insomnia.
work. It was like you need sleep for like your mind to function properly, and like everything else, like it's like the foundation of your mental health is like rest and relaxation and sleep. Like your body, you need to reset at night, and it's so hard to do that out there because you're worried about the survival stuff, and like in my head was like also I'm like we have to film a certain amount, and I've got to like find interesting things to film, which I shouldn't have worried about, but I did. And like, again, it's one of those hindsight things where like, I shouldn't have like spent so much time thinking about like creative ways to film things. I should have just like done stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh man, if like you said, hindsight, if I could go back in time and do the same thing over again with the knowledge that I have now from it, it'd be a completely different game.
Absolutely.
Know?
Yeah. Like I'll go out like on a survival trip for the weekend or something. Like I'll do like a 3-day trip, or especially in the winter. I love going out in the winter. That's my favorite time to go. And like I don't sleep very much at all because I'm like I've only got like 3 days and then I gotta go back to work. So I'm up like early and I stay up late and I'm just out like doing bushcraft and fishing and trapping, and it's like whatever, I'll get caught up on that. But like even as short as like 8 days, that you can't get caught up on that sleep after a while. And going with that like that same mentality that I would have on a shorter trip where I'm like I'll sleep later, I'm having too much, like I got too much to do and I got having too much fun. And it gets to the point where it's like you can't recover, and then you make the mistake of staying up for 2 days with your smoker. And it's like next thing you know you're at base camp and you're like, well, how did I get here?
Well, I mean, the smoker, that's another thing that I mentioned too. People don't understand. I keep saying people don't understand. Maybe they just don't know. There's ignorance to it. Not saying that in a bad way. Ignorance just means that you don't know something. But people don't know that smoking food takes a long time.
It does, especially
even on
animals getting it.
Even on a smoker, one of our modern smokers, it takes a long time to smoke food. Now, if you did that in a smoker built out of sticks, it takes longer. And like you said, you don't want another animal coming up and taking that food from you, and they are more than willing to. And so you just don't want that to happen. So putting myself in your boots, I would definitely have stayed up the entire time, because number one, you don't want that animal taking your food. Number two, you don't want the smoker to stop smoking. You want it to continue to produce smoke. So I would have done the same thing. Honestly, I would have been up for those 2 days, trying like hell to keep that smoke rolling and keep any animals away from it.
And that was pretty much the end for I think my brain had enough at that point and made the call for me. It was if you want to talk about like tapping out, we can, like that was
well we'll get to that in a minute. What was the rest? I know smoking the fish. What was the rest of the plan? I know we didn't get to see it happen, and that's terrible, but what was the rest of the plan that you had going to store that food? Were you we seen you were building a ladder? Were you going to build a platform? Were you going to pull the tops of 2 trees together and try to hang a rope? Was you just going to hang a rope from a limb?
After I built that what I like to call the world's worst bushcraft ladder, and that was a
It was
yeah that was.
it was a doozy.
I shouldn't have been allowed to use sharp tools at that stage. Someone should
Well,
have
like
come
you
and told
said,
me, let that
after
saw
so
away and have a
long
nap.
of
So, yeah, it's
after so long of being exhausted and stuff like that, man, it's just mistakes are made and stuff. And
yeah.
I even said in my little recap of that, there was a few things that I didn't like that was going on right there, but at
Oh
the
yeah,
same
watching
time,
that video, I was like, oh my God, like what are you doing? Like, why would you do that? It just seemed all normal at the time, but
yeah. But I've been in those. I've been at that situation. You know, I built 4 different shelters. I was exhausted. I built 4. My brain was not working correctly. I built 4 different shelters and tore 3 of them down. You know what I'm saying? And ended up with the one I slept in. But it was because I couldn't. I wasn't thinking clearly. To me, I was a genius at the time. But looking back at it, I was like, man, that was the dumbest thing you could have ever done.
yeah.
You should have never done that.
Well, the regulations were we had to have our food cache 3 meters up, which is like 10 feet. So, and the spruce trees were so small there, I couldn't like there were no branches to throw a rope over, right? You had to hang a rope, tie a rope to one tree, and then tie a rope to another tree, and then put it in over the middle of that rope, right? You had to make your own branch basically. And I was going to use my gaiters as just like a pouch. I brought like I brought some gaiters, and they were extra large gaiters that I would never need to wear because I've had rubber boots, but I figured I'd use them for other stuff. And yeah, they'd make a good
Foraging
pouch.
bag.
Yeah, foraging
Yeah.
bags, or like I was going to shove my fish in one,
Yeah.
and the other one I was saving for my flap for the vent on my shelter once I got a fire going in there, because it was like I brought gaiters that were like sort of a nylon material that wouldn't catch on fire, and and yeah, and I was just gonna hang the fish up in that. Like they gave us a big black rope. They probably saw it. I'm not sure if you saw it, but up past seasons have had. I don't know if they gave you guys one too, but they gave us a big rope for making a food cache with because of the grizzlies.
Yeah.
And we had to have it like 50 meters away from our shelter. So like all my cooking area was 50 meters away from our shelter. We couldn't have food in our shelter, or we couldn't use our shelter to like we couldn't smoke food in our shelter or make food in our shelter or eat in our shelter even. We had to do all of that 50 meters away. So the ladder was just to get that rope up in the tree like securely. Like I could try to throw it, but it'd be hard. It might catch on something, it might not, it might break, I don't know. But yeah, that ladder was just to get that rope up, 3 meters off the ground. So I made the ladder like 2 meters, and then I could climb up and
yeah. I mean, that's a genius thing to do. I mean, that way you could get up just high enough where to make that extra meter, whatever.
Yeah.
Just talking about the regulation, it has to be X amount of feet away or whatever your food cache and stuff. They told us that our kitchen camp had to be 100 yards from our shelter. My kitchen camp was probably 20 yards from my shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I looked out the door of my shelter, I could see it pretty easily, and most of the time that I cooked, I was inside my shelter. I had my other fire pit, a little tripod inside my shelter. I never told anybody that I was doing it, you know what I'm saying? But that's all the mice and stuff that I caught. I cooked all of those in the shelter. I had meat hanging above me where I was drying out grouse meat and stuff. And looking back on it, it's probably not a smart thing to do. But at the same time, in my mind at that point in time, I was like, please, bear, please walk by me.
You guys were allowed
come to me in the daylight.
They were on the menu for you, right? Black bears?
Yeah, black bears. So I was at one point I was thinking, please, black bear. I hope you know this. Just come on.
Yeah. Oops, I accidentally left this fish out. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were allowed black bears as well, but the locals were all
no
like,
grizzly?
there are no black bears in the area, but we weren't allowed to hunt grizzlies. No, they were off.
No, that sucked. It wouldn't seem like there would be a bunch of black bears, seeing that there's such a dense population of grizzlies.
Yeah, that's what they said. The grizzlies came in and chased all the black bears away.
Yeah.
but there are lots of grizzlies out there. They're not exaggerating when they talk about the grizzlies. There was
Yeah.
one cool thing I filmed actually on like it was like day 3. I was walking out to that beach where I fished, and my tracks were there from the day before, and then there were like grizzly tracks on top of my boot tracks. It was like walking on the same path, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool!" That was like the coolest thing, and I filmed it. I don't think they showed it, but like that was that was day 3 or day 4 probably. So
That would have been awesome.
But yeah, it was like just grizzly tracks like on top of my boot tracks. They were smaller, but still, there's a grizzly walking in like my
footsteps. Grizzly, yeah.
Either way, it's still a grizzly.
Yeah.
Small grizzly is still bigger than me.
I was going to ask you if there's anything that if there was anything that you filmed that they didn't show that you wish they would have shown. I understand your shelter got messed up, the SD card or whatever, but
yeah,
is there anything else that that they didn't show that you filmed that you would have liked for people to see?
I don't think they showed quite like they didn't capture how much like time I spent fishing. Like there was a lot of time spent fishing, and even just like I walked back to some of the farther lakes that were back in my area, and they're beautiful lakes. They're really big too. They didn't look that big from the air, but when you got there, they were pretty huge. And at one point, I was out back, and there's this like children's book called like Good Night Moon. I don't know if you've ever read that one.
The what?
Good Night Moon, where it's like a
Good Night Moon. I think I have.
It's saying good night to everything, and I was like, I was filming a Good Night Alone, and I went back to the back. I went back to the pond to say good night to the pond and film it. And there was this huge owl. I don't know what kind of owl it was, but man, it was absolutely enormous, and it was just like sitting there, and I was like, just like talking to it and filming it, and I was like, I just like sat there, and like it was nighttime or getting dark, and I just like watched it for so long. It was like it was such a cool experience to have like this huge owl just like right there, and it was just like staring at me, and eventually it flew away, and it was really cool. But like in the berries, like I don't know, I make a lot of really bad jokes, and like all the time, but I made so many out there, and then like there was every time I'd put spruce boughs on my bed, I'd be like just sprucing this place up a little, or like I'm like at one point I even told the camera, I looked at the camera, I'm like, I'm gonna say this so many times, you're gonna have to put it in. I would leave messages for the editors to apologize for things, and every time I hit something with my shovel, it made like this awful twang sound, which I was like worried. I'm like, they're gonna have to like do something about that sound because no one's gonna want to hear that sound. And at one point, I was pounding stakes in for my bed to put the supports in my bed in, and I was like, okay, sound guys, I'm gonna give you a break, and I'm not gonna use my shovel. I'm gonna use this like stick to pound these stakes in. So then I start pounding the stake in, and I start going twang, twang, twang. Which of course to me was the funniest thing ever. I don't think they appreciated it as much. I hope someone watching that film in the cutting room floor somewhere, like whatever room they're editing, I hope someone got a giggle out of it at least, because I thought it was hilarious. And then so many like berries, man, I would just stop. And I made a joke where I was on the sea berry diet. So like if I saw berries, I just ate them, I see berries, I eat them. That's the diet I was on. Like I didn't try to like bring any back with me. I would just sit down and I would just gorge on like every berry I found, and I'd be like, okay, these berries are gone, I'm going. The lingonberries were the best ones. And
the lingonberries were my favorite, man. My gators, I would fill them as much up as I could. I would fill them. I didn't just sit there and eat them. I was trying to constantly move, but I would pick as many as I could, and then when I got back to my shelter, I would just pig out on them. I'd just hold the gator up and do this and just pig out on them.
I would just sit there for like 20, 30 minutes, and usually when I was out looking for moose, and I'd just be like, okay, I'm just gonna sit down and eat some berries, and then do my awful moose call later, which I had great fun with at home practicing. My kids really loved that noise I made.
Oh, I bet they really loved that one.
It was like, it turned out to be like, my wife and I joke how it was like how we call our kids in when they're not listening. I just make a moose call, and they come in to tell me to be quiet, and I'm like, oh, we wanted to talk to you.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it was just like, it just became like a joke where like, yeah, if the kids were like had headphones on or whatever and they weren't listening to us, I would just make my moose call and they'd be like, they'd be like, stop making that noise. Be like, oh, hey, you're here. You did hear me. And yeah, they didn't really. I mean, I was waiting a bit because one of my friends who used to live up in the area was talking about moose hunting there, and they were like, what would have been about day 12, day 13 for us was like the peak sort of moose season. So that's like when I planned to put most of my effort into moose hunting. And that way I could sort of like maximize my chances with like minimizing my effort. Like
Yeah.
it was like there's that bell curve of where the moose hunting, right? So I was only going to hunt that like or to start hunting closer to the top of the curve, so I wouldn't have to spend so much time doing it. And then I would just moose hunt for the rest of until I couldn't moose hunt anymore. Basically, that was kind of my goal. I didn't. Yeah, they didn't really show any of my efforts there, which is and they can't put everything in, right? Like, it's I think it worked out to be about 27 minutes of screen time. I think I saw online someone calculated everyone's screen time. My total for the 2 episodes was 27 minutes. So
people are a lot better at that than I am. I didn't know how many minutes, but I did do. I don't know if you saw the little video that I did right before y'all season came out. Whenever you guys first started announcing that you were going to be on the show, I did the little breakdown of the time.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I used my time because I didn't know anybody else's, but I used the time that I was out there.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, you were there 8 days.
Yeah.
And they showed out of 8 days, they showed less than half an hour of the time that you were there.
Like 2 or 3 minutes of that is just like slow-mo of me tapping out. So
or your casting videos.
I'm not. I don't know if that includes the casting like bio videos or not, but it's you can't
well, I mean, whenever it shows you drop and then you do some stuff and then you start talking about what led up to the show, blah blah blah, what you do while you're out in the woods and stuff. And they're showing your casting videos and stuff during that time. So I mean, you don't get a whole lot of time to show everything.
Yeah, and I understand they can't, but if they wanted to make the season like 20 episodes, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. Oh, me too. It would have been a lot better.
Then they could just show so much. But they're limited. I think that's 8 days. There was not a lot of stuff to leave out, and I'm glad they left out some stuff though. Like there was this channel behind where my shelter was, and it was like this really steep, muddy bank, right? And I went back there to go fishing with my hand line, and I like cast out, and as I cast out, I slip and I slide down the bank, and I get stuck in the mud, and then my fishing lure gets snagged on a branch at the same time. So I like slid down this mud, got stuck at the bottom, and snagged my fishing lure all at once. And I was like, that's going to be on TV. But thankfully, they didn't show that one. But I was like, yeah, in my head, like the last few months, I'm like, they're going to show me just slipping in the mud. In my hand, they showed me cutting my hand with a saw, but what they didn't show was like me cutting my other hand right after that. I did the exact same thing on my other hand right after that. I have like twin scars on my knuckles from that saw, and I was like, "Damn, this guy gets
those silky saws. They do not play at all. They are sharp."
Yeah, and I thought it was smart because I put my like glove on, and I'm like, "Okay, I'll put my glove on to keep my hand safe," and just went straight into my glove, like no problem. My glove has like 4 holes in it from the saw teeth.
I was wearing a pair of pants. I was doing a video one time, and I was wearing a pair of pants, and I cut through the little sapling, and when I cut through the sapling, the saw just kept going through the air and stabbed me right in the kneecap. So it was like 14 holes all the way across my kneecap. Ooh. Oh yeah, and it took a while to recover from that. It was hard to bend my leg and stuff, and I guess just from where it hit.
Yeah, it hit me like right on the top of the knuckle here, and I know they show me pulling a fish in. I think they showed me pulling a fish in the next day, like day 8, I think it was, and you could tell that I was like had been awake for a long time at that point, and but also I couldn't pull that fish in because I couldn't close my hands because I just cut
Yeah.
my knuckles open with the saw, so I couldn't really. I was trying to grab the line to pull it in, but I couldn't squeeze anymore, and I couldn't put my work gloves on either because my hands were swollen.
Because the teeth on those things are not they're not short. And when they go in deep.
Yeah, I was surprised how much that thing bled, and it took so long to get it to stop. I was like, gotta
Yeah.
stop bleeding so I can put this ladder in the tree, guys. Come on. But yeah, it was. Yeah, that was. So I'm glad they didn't show a lot of good stuff I did, but they also didn't show a lot of dumb stuff I did. So that was
Yeah.
good.
It's still they try to, and I try to tell everybody this too, you know, you got to be prepared for it. They try to tell your story, but they also try to, you know, make TV, like Cubby said, you know, it's got to be good television. And
Oh yeah,
so they take
and,
what they can and make that good television.
and yeah, I can't really fault them for that. I mean, they do take like input too, right? Like at the end, they were asking me how I felt my time out there went, and they
Yeah.
having watched it, they like 100% factored all that into their storytelling. So that was really good.
Yeah.
That was great to see. So yeah, I think the edit for me was probably it was a good one. I would say I don't really have any complaints about it. It was all honest, and I mean all that stuff happened obviously, and you know
Yeah.
could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, it's not that they try to fabricate the story, but they still have to take those 8 days and put them into this little section, and they have to do all of that and make it fit the timeline. You
Yeah,
know, so it's got to be tough for them too. Yeah,
that's definitely not a job I would want.
yeah, no,
Just even like going through all that footage and just trying to pick parts out and like putting a story together or like some sort of cohesive like experience out there where it's not just like
yeah.
jumping from one thing to the next. It all like goes together like that's pretty tough. That's definitely a skill set I don't have.
Oh yeah, no, it's got to be hard. Especially they're wanting you to film 40 hours a week. Try to take
Yeah,
a 40-hour segment and make it 27 minutes long. That's
yeah,
that's
exactly.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
8 days is probably pushing like 65, 70 hours of footage over 8 days, right? And it's like,
yeah,
I mean, a
that's
lot
a
of that
lot.
was like, I mean, some of that is just me walking around, which is you probably cut that out pretty quick.
Yeah.
They cut all of my terrible jokes, which is kind of sad. But I did, took my silky saw out and swung it around like a samurai in the woods a few times, which is probably pretty dangerous now that I think about it. But they
You
didn't put
gotta
that.
have fun with it too, though. You know.
You do, and my shovel was so fun. Like I would just like I'd flip that thing and try to land it in the ground, and I would toss it at like a stump, and it would stick in the stump. Stuff like I would never do that with an axe because I'd be so worried about ruining the blade of my axe, right? You don't throw an axe in the ground, but the shovel you could just like file it flat when you're done, and it's brand new again.
Yeah.
It was a fun tool.
Ground.
It was like a toy and a tool at the same time. I definitely don't regret taking that. That was a fantastic choice. It was a tough one, but it ended up working out really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't take a shovel because there was no dirt on my side. It was all
Yeah.
rocks and bubbles. Yeah. But
I think some people had really rocky sites depending on what side of the river you were on, but mine was all mud, so it worked out good.
Yeah. So leading into everything else, you were talking about you wasn't sleeping real well.
Oh yeah, that was.
And then emotions started to swell up on you.
Absolutely.
And that happened to me pretty quick too. I remember I moved from my original site to a spot where there was food because there was nothing where I was at. So I moved from my original spot to a spot where there was food, and they came out, they checked everything to make sure that it was okay for me to stay there, and they did a little interview. And I remember Raph asking me, he said, "So how are you doing?" And I hadn't eaten 6 days. I was exhausted because I just made a 3-hour walk through the thickest shit I've ever been in my life. And man, I was just sitting there. I was almost in tears, to be completely honest with you. And I was like, man, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I said, at home, this is nothing. Here, I can't get out of my head.
Right.
I'm laying there in the silence and in the darkness, and I can't get out of my head, and I'm trying to find outlets for it, and then I'm exhausted. So and so, you know the whole story of it all.
Yeah.
You know how it goes. It really is. It's hard on you, and those emotions, they get at you fast.
Yeah, especially like me personally, I've always tried to not be emotional, like negatively,
Yep.
like, and this is a conscious decision I made when I was like a teenager. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna not be sad.
Yeah.
And, but I'm a human being, so like it's not entirely possible. It's not how we're designed, right?
Yep.
We get good emotions, we get bad emotions, but we get them all. And the way I kind of like visualize it in my head is like, there's this like door in my brain holding these things back, right? And normally I've got like 10 little versions of me holding this door back. But when you're out on alone, it's like, I need to take one of those guys away to deal with like the stress of finding food. I need to take one of those guys away to deal with like the stress that I'm having from the firewood that I can't find and it's going to get cold soon. And then taking all these like little versions of me away from holding this door back until there's just not enough left. And then the door just opens
Yeah.
and it's like, here's all those things I've put away. And it's like, it was like happening for the first time, like,
Yep.
I don't know if you've ever had like a parent pass away and it's like, that happens to me, I'd be like, whatever, I'm not gonna like be sad about this. I'm just gonna put that away and pack it up. And then it was like, imagine you're getting a phone call for the first time that you just found this news out now, and that's kind of how it felt because I never bothered to deal with that when it happened, right? And it was like,
Yeah.
it's just like happening for the first time. I was building a rabbit pound. It's called. It's like a square sort of rabbit trap that you bait, and I was just sitting in it, setting up some snares and in the rabbit pound, and it was like I just had this random memory of like my dad shooting a rabbit once, and it was hilarious because he shot it with like a shotgun and like obliterated it. It was like it was funny, and then I was like, oh yeah, my dad passed away, and it was like I just realized that for the first time. It was just like couldn't stop it. I just like burst into tears. I'm like, what? Like what just happened to me? Like where did that come from? Like why did that happen? And then after that, it just got more and more common, more frequent, and then it was just like a bizarre experience. Like it was like, yeah, it was so weird that it just randomly happened one day, and I was like, okay, that was strange. Why did that happen? But yeah, but like I said, it's just because you're so stressed out about everything else, and you're using so much of like your mental energy to deal with all these things, the survival aspects, every little survival thing, the stress of being on the show, like the expectations they have to be an alone contestant, those are huge. And the filming, thinking about that and just thinking about everything, it's just you're stretched into so many different places, and you just can't like your mind doesn't work the way it normally would under normal circumstances, right?
Yeah, I remember telling Raph, he asked me a question. I can't remember what the question was, but I told him I have a unique ability to turn off my emotions. That I don't have to feel stressed out. I don't have to feel angry. I don't have to feel sad. So I can just turn that off, and I'm perfectly fine. And in the real world, or in the world, I can't even call it the real world anymore. In the world that we live in, it's not that. It's just that there's so many different outlets that you can turn to not think about that. It was never turned off. It's just there's so many other things that I can do to not have to deal with that. Whatever was going through my head. But once you get out there, there's no other distractions.
Yeah.
You can't sit down and turn on the TV. So it really starts to set in on you. And it sucks. It sucks bad.
It's shocking, when you have been able to turn these things off for so long, and then you lose that ability, right? And it's just like I can't like control this anymore. I can't stop. Like normally I would just be like, hey, I'm just not going to be sad because that's dumb. But out there it was just like that ability didn't exist anymore, right? Any random thought that should have made you sad normally was just like there's nothing to prevent it from happening. And it was just like it started probably day 2, I would say. I don't think I had time to like really get into that mode on day one. But day two, when I built that rabbit pound on day two, and that's the first time I like really went into like this like emotional state that I was like, it was very shocking because I was like, wow, I don't think I've cried in like 15 years, you know.
Yeah.
It's just like, whoa, what was that? I can't stop that. You know, you know, at the end of the day, like I'm glad I went through that because, you know, it helps me like understand things better, like people. Like I know a lot of people, like my son, you know, for example, he's, you know, he's a caring, he's very empathetic and caring, and he's like gets super happy and, you know, super sad. He's really emotional, which is I'd always viewed as like a negative thing and didn't have the patience for because it's like something that
Yeah.
I controlled. But like I definitely view that differently now. So definitely that's like an advantage of having been on the show. You know, it's I just I wish I had discovered that, you know, not on the show.
Yeah.
Like it would have been nice to discover that like at a different time because
Yeah.
I was kind of busy, you know. I kind of had stuff to do, so it would have been nice if I had like discovered that, you know, on my own at like some other point in my life, like 10 years ago would have been nice, but because that would have been nice to, you know, not leave the show. And but yeah, and that did have an impact. I'm not sure it was 100% of the reason, and that's kind of still a mystery to me, to be honest. So I don't know.
But it's good that you can. It's good that you have a takeaway from it too. You
Absolutely.
know. Yeah. Uh, it's a. You know, I said the same thing whenever I came out of the woods. I said there's two sets of footprints on Reindeer Lake. There's the Mikey that got off the boat. You know what I'm saying? And there's this guy that I had never met that got on the boat whenever he left.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I have a big takeaway from the show too. You know, I may have lost or whatever, but even before everything else started happening, I was a completely different person with a whole new mindset. Uh, I didn't have to hold back anymore, and that changed my life. It changed my family's life. It's a wonderful thing, you know.
For me, it was definitely like understanding, like when other people like are feeling these things, and like, okay, I get it, I understand now because I felt that finally, you know,
Yeah.
and never really done it before. So there's definitely some like a lot of empathy that comes from that. But yeah, just like I said, you know, it's you definitely came out a different person, like me as well. Like I definitely think that it's like a I don't know. I think I described it to the when we're doing our exit interview as like more human rather than less of a robot, which is what I always thought was like the proper way to live, you know.
Yeah.
And but you know, then if you do live like that, you end up with like this once in a lifetime chance on a loan, and then you end up like me, where I just like blew it because like it was entirely my own fault, right? It was like, well, clearly you were doing something wrong because this happened.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not something that I wouldn't just go to a point fault. Like I said, it was a coping mechanism for me, you
Mhm.
know, and same for you. You just didn't want to feel sad, you know,
Exactly.
you didn't want to feel that. So it was a coping mechanism for you. But once you got out there, there's no coping with anything out there. You just
I
you
know.
know
Yeah.
it hit you in the face as hard as it can,
It
especially any
does.
kind of
Yeah.
skeleton.
It's
You
like
know,
I was talking to I was talking to Amos Rodriguez, and he was like, we're talking about it, and I was like, you know, it's like the whole. Yeah, if you ever done like a vision quest, you know, it's not something I would ever do before, right? That seems
yeah,
like some hocus pocus to me, right? Like no, but it's like kind of like the whole 8 days I was out there. It was that's like what it felt like. It was like this weird like me but not me experiencing myself from the outside kind of thing, and it was so weird. But at the same time, it was like it was positive at the end, right?
yeah.
Yeah, but like I said, you know, it would have been nice to maybe do that before going on the show.
Oh yeah. No, trust me, it would have been nice. It would have made everything a lot easier.
Yeah, it would have. But yeah, then
But there's a time and place for everything, and yeah, it sucks that it happened on the show. You know what I'm saying? But
oh yeah,
like I tell people with my personal experience, not yours, but my personal experience, mine happened on the show too. You know, I broke down and I cried for X amount of millions of people to see. I bawled like a child, you know, but that's because that's where I was at. I was gone, but it it's just I don't know. There was a time and place for it. And that was the only place that I was going to take the time to do it. You
Yeah,
know, yeah,
and a lot of it I think too is like there's no one else out there, right? So it's just you. Like if I were to, last year, a year ago or whatever, if I were to like get sad and need to like cry something out, it'd be like, well, there's people in that room, there's people upstairs, there's people across the street, everyone's gonna know. But when you're out there, it's
yeah,
like it's just you and trees, right? There's no one,
yeah,
in the Arctic, no one can hear you cry. So it's like
yes, exactly. Yeah,
so I think that may have had something to do with it too, right? Because you're like, there's no judgment out there. There's no one around to judge you for anything. So you
yeah,
can feel what you want. And I think like subconsciously part of you knew that, right? And it's like, okay, this is a safe place for you to do this. And then
yeah.
I think that may have had something to do with it. I don't really know, but I'm not an expert in that,
Oh
obviously.
yeah, it's good to have the opportunity to do it. You know, but so after the tap out, when you went back to base camp, uh, how long did you stay at base camp, and what was that recovery time like?
Um, yeah, after I tapped out, I stayed there for about 6 or 7 days. I can't remember. And one of the reasons they actually had me stay out there was it turns out like my blood pressure was so high that the doctor wouldn't let me leave till it came down.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was something I didn't. But I kind of like could feel it because I could kind of feel the blood pressure like going. That was probably just I don't know if that was from the lack of sleep or whatever. But yeah, I had to stay 6 or 7 days because of that. And I was fortunate because like Cubby was there, so I had someone to talk to,
Yeah,
right? So he left at
that's
like,
awesome.
and honestly, it would have been a way different experience if he wasn't there because like we hung out and we had a great time and
Yeah,
well, as good time as you can after that fifth year, but like
yeah,
it was cool to have someone else there. Like it would have been really hard without someone else to like hang out with and talk to the whole time. I don't know how anyone else would have done that. Like I don't know if was there anyone there when you left or
no, whenever I tapped out, it was 10 days, 11 days. I was there,
okay.
and that is just because I had lost so much weight, you
Yeah.
know, and my feet were bad off from the cold. But the day before I left, Wyatt came out. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I got to hug Wyatt when he came
Oh,
out.
that's
I got
cool.
to tell him hey and stuff like that. And but then the next day I had to go. But I was so
Yeah.
happy to be going home, you
Yeah.
know, that it was I don't know how to explain. I love Wyatt to death. You know, so that's my buddy. But and I would have stayed there with him for the next 2 weeks, you know what I'm saying? But I was just
Yeah.
so happy to be going home that I was like, man, I gotta go, you know.
Yeah. It's like talking about like the tap out itself, I that was like obviously I made the press the button on the phone and made the phone call, but like at that point I'd been awake for I don't know, a while, a couple days probably. And like it was like me making that call, but also at the same time, it was not something I had any control over. And it was like super scary because like I remember making the call and I remember this little voice in the back of my head being like, don't tap out, like why are you quitting? Like you can't leave. But it was like nothing I could do to stop it from happening. It was like almost like an out of body experience. And it was like I got back to the base camp and uh I was kind of out of it. I saw Cubby there, and I was surprised. I thought I was the first one out for sure, and that was a good surprise to see him there. Well, for me, I guess not a good surprise because he had to later up, but and then I got to the base camp and I got like some electrolytes, and I was still awake for the rest of the day. I couldn't get to sleep, and then finally I was able to sleep, and like either the day after or maybe the second day I was there, where I was like really started to come back to like my normal like consciousness, right? My normal like ability to think clearly, and I was like I was just sitting there in my little dome shelter thing they had for us, and I was like, why am I here? You know, I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be out there more. And like, there was a point where I would have given my left arm for them to just drop me back off at my site and like, just leave me there. Like, I don't even need my tools. Just leave me there and let me keep going. Like I would have begged, but like, it took a couple of days for my brain to come back to that point because, when you're in that situation, the stress, your brain makes you think it's cool, right? Like, I remember being like totally accepting of tapping out, and then like the next day or the day after, I was like, wait a minute, why am I here? Like, I had no reason to tap out. I was doing really good, and then, but yeah, my brain just like it made that call for me, and I was not
Yeah.
in control at the time, and yeah, it was terrifying thinking that that's like possible. You hear about people doing like weird stuff that they have no control over, and they're like, but it's some of those things where like that'll never happen to me. Like that's not possible, right? But then next thing you know, I'm just like on the phone tapping out, and I was like not fully entirely 100%, able to like do anything about it. It just flowed out, and it's like I had zero control over my actions at that point. I remember the
Yeah.
exact moment it happened. I went to get some more alder for the smoker, and I was just walking back, and it was like the switch just went off in my head. It was like, okay, you're done. Go bye. And I just went straight for the bag and grabbed the satellite phone and called right away. And it was like it was a really weird experience, man. It was like it was terrifying. Not gonna lie, I was afraid that and I've thought about it since. I'm like, can I do something like that again? Like, what happens if I like do something else that I don't really have any control over? Like, I don't know.
No, but at the point where your body and mind is so stressed, especially because that button, I don't care who you are, that button is always in the back of your mind.
It is for sure.
It doesn't. I don't. Even the people that win the seasons, and I don't care what they say, that button's always back there. God, I've had a really hard day today. That button. Wow, I just fell and I hurt my leg. That button.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't catch any fish. That button. It's always there. And so once you get to the point of your body and mind is stressed so bad, it's kind of like autopilot.
that's exactly what it was. It was like something in my brain was like he's switching to autopilot, and it's like, let's go get some hamburgers, man. We're out of here. And I think a lot of that, like that, I was struggling like emotionally for sure, but I think honestly, I think it was the lack of sleep that sort of did me in. Like I think that was again, hindsight is 2020. I probably shouldn't have stayed up for 2 days making smoking fish, but
Well, even with, I mean, with the emotional stuff and just the stresses, not sleeping and being exhausted adds to everything.
yeah,
It doesn't matter if you got a cold and you don't sleep. That cold's 4 times worse than it was the
absolutely.
day before. It adds to everything. So, not
Yeah,
sleeping is terrible. Uh, it does. It makes bad decisions. It makes bad things happen. But it's so hard to sleep when your body's telling you not to, or when your mind's
yeah.
telling you not to.
You've got so much to do. It's like it almost felt like a waste of time to
Yeah.
sleep. And again, like I know that now, so
Yeah.
it would be different if I were to do it again. But I'd probably take a sleeping pad instead of something. It's like a feather pillow on an option on the 10 items list, or
I tried to make a grouse feather pillow.
did you?
I still have all the grouse feathers.
Oh yeah,
But I started to make a grouse feather pillow out of the sleeve of my rain jacket, and I didn't start saving. If I would have saved it, I killed 19 grouse.
oh wow.
If I would have saved the feathers from all of them earlier, I would have had a bad little pillow. But I didn't. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It was a definitely sleep was
Whenever you were in the recovery time, how was the crew? I mean, did everybody treat you well and everything?
Oh yeah, definitely. Didn't really see them as much as I thought I would. 'Cause they'd come and check on you once in a while, but like
Yeah,
you did spend a lot of time on your own after
yeah.
you tap out, and which I'm not
They
sure
give
it's a
you
good
that.
idea.
They give you that mental break. Because yeah,
Yeah,
you've been alone, but it's completely different being alone out there in the woods than it is being alone in that tent trying to cope with everything that just happened. You
Yeah,
know,
you got
they
all
give
the
you that time.
you're reliving like every moment out there like all the time, right? And for
Yeah.
me, I was like so mad at myself for like tapping out, and I like still like I took me forever to realize to believe that it had actually happened, right? And so I think personally, I would have benefited from some more company. I know some people probably want to stay on their own and get some have some alone time
Yeah.
after that, but I wasn't really, yeah, I wasn't really in a state of mind where like being alone was a good thing. So I tried to like interact. There was like the dude who managed the camp and all the tents and everything. So he was there to
Yeah.
talk to, whether he wanted to or not. We had some chats. And then and Cubby was there, which was great. So we did some chatting and did some basket making, and
That's
they had
awesome.
things set up to watch movies. So we watched like Forrest Gump and
Oh, that's awesome. It's only the best movie ever made. You know,
yeah, I'd never seen it before, and he was like, "What? You've never seen Forrest Gump?" So I'm
what?
like,
You've
"I
never
should
seen
watch
it
it."
before.
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, I'm
So
glad you got to see it.
yeah, it was pretty fun. It was a fun movie.
Yeah.
They had like this little house that it was like an old broke down abandoned like cabin type thing in the back. I think they may have like fixed it up a little bit for us because it was pretty sketchy. So we hung out in there. There were like grizzly bear prints on the inside of the window. So there's a bear inside that at one point trying to. It's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
So we hung out in that like old broke down house and watched Forrest Gump. It was a pretty good time. Did some basket weaving. I showed him how to make a willow basket. Yeah, it was okay. Those first few days are rough, but like the last few days were a bit better. But
Yeah.
I know you said you wanted to go home at the end of yours, but I was kind of the opposite. Honestly, I kind of didn't want to go home because I was worried, I guess, about like coming home so soon, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knowing that I came home so soon, and I came home and I think I like hid in my house for like 3 weeks and didn't want to go anywhere, go do anything or be seen.
No, I wouldn't even go into Walmart for a while. I didn't want anybody to see me, especially, I mean, around here, when you see somebody that looks like I looked then, you're like, well, he's strung out on something.
Oh yeah,
My face was all sunk in. I had a full beard. My clothes
yeah,
were hanging off of me because I was so skinny.
yeah.
But at
I
the
think,
same time, and it still comes to me sometimes. And I get it sometimes having these little chats with you guys. It's like, man, I can't believe, I was there. And
yeah,
then to me, for a long time there, I was like, I failed. I put everything I had into that and I failed.
yeah,
And so yeah, it sucked. Whenever I came out, I got onto the boat. Whenever I tapped out, I got onto the boat pretty good. By the time we got back to base camp, I couldn't pick my legs up. I was so exhausted, and my body just finally said, "You know what? Hell with it. Just give up." I was
yeah,
so exhausted, I couldn't pick my legs up to get out of the boat. They had to pull me up out of the boat. I spent my first 2 days curled up in a ball on the little plywood bed that they had, sitting with the lights out. They were like, "You got to eat. I need you to eat this."
yeah, yeah.
I was bad off. So trust me, I know the whole 1 or 2 days you're still, everything's still fresh and just raw, and it's insane.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
the first thing they gave me like it was like a sloppy Joe. That was my first food they had when I got back. It was like a little half
wow.
sloppy Joe. That was
God,
like
you were so
it was
lucky, man. I'm
it
not
was
even
like
playing.
it was like the best tasting food I've ever eaten in my life.
When I tapped out, they gave me probably 6 peanuts and 2 dried apricots and a cup of broth and said, "Here,
Oh, really?
eat this."
Yeah,
Like I got some grouse. I got grouse breast jerky in my shelter. I could probably just eat that. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? They're like, "No, eat these apricots and this
yeah.
broth." But
Half
like
of
you
a
said, it was
hard-boiled egg.
delicious. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a little. It was like it just wasn't even like a full bun. It was like half a bun with like sloppy Joe mix on it. It was just like flavor for the first time in like 8 days, right? All I've
Yeah.
eaten berries and boiled fish. So now you got spices all of a sudden. You're like, whoa, this is amazing. Yeah, it was pretty funny. But
Well, I have to ask. I'm sure a lot of people have already asked you, but I have to ask. Would you do it again?
oh man, I would
Would
do
you
it
go
again
out and
so
do it again?
fast. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that I know, like, I knew like survival skills wise, I was good. But now that I know about how the other things are going to affect me, I think it would be like completely different scenario, right? Like knowing how to pace myself and not burn myself out, knowing
Yeah.
how important rest is, and knowing what those stresses are going to be. Yeah, I would absolutely do it again. It'd be one of those things where like there's no other opportunities for me to do something like that. Like I can't just take a month off work and abandon everyone and go live in the woods for a month. So like that's really like the only chance I would ever have of doing something like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, 100%, I would 100% do it again. And I think it would go very differently second time. I'll dust off my big
Yeah.
boy pants and we'll get some fat going and then get started training again for it for sure. And yeah, how about you, man? Would you do it again?
Oh yeah, I would do it again. I would
Yes.
definitely do it again. And like you say, you kept saying hindsight's 2020, but
Yeah.
when you can look back and you can learn from what you did,
Right.
that's that's what makes the difference. And
Yeah,
I
exactly.
believe I can learn a lot from what I did out there too. I
Yeah.
wouldn't go out there and like you say, I wouldn't have all these the skeletons in my closet or whatever that's
Mhm.
constantly eating at me. All that's gone.
Exactly.
So I could have a clear mind and focus
Yeah. Yeah. All
and
the things
hopefully
that,
catch a fish.
yeah. Yeah. If not, just, trebuchet me a message and I'll send you one.
Yes, that is awesome. Oh man. Well, to be completely honest with you, Peter, I hope you get another chance. You know,
Yeah, you too, man. Yeah. I'll see you. I'll
and
see you on the redemption season.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah,
so.
that'd be fun. Yeah. Hopefully they don't make me shave next time, but yeah.
Oh man, they made me. I cut my beard down to just nothing. It was like I I got a lot of Irish in me, and that's my excuse for not having a defined chin. The rest, I got this big old body. I'm this big man or whatever, and I've got this little small child's chin, right? But I can cover it well because I have this majestic beard. And so before I went on the show, I never had a chin. I always had my beard. I never had a chin. They
Yeah.
made me they made me cut my beard, and all of a sudden I found two more chins back here. You know,
that's that's funny. Yeah. They
I
made me
said,
keep my
"Wow,
beard. I grew a beard out and I had one when I started the casting videos, and they're like, don't change your appearance from when you
yeah,
started the casting videos. So I like had this like, well, a beard. I can't really grow a big beard, right? It's not my genetics, but like, and I don't normally have a beard, but I kept this I don't know, scraggly beard I had growing on. And then I get there and they're like, oh, we need you to shave. And I'm like, I've had this beard for like 6 months now. And now you want me to shave? Like, why did you tell me that in the summer when I had this ridiculous beard? then I shaved and I was like, I remember looking in this mirror and I'm like, man, I look like a little baby. Like I was got
yeah."
this smooth skin you're wearing. Yeah,
I told Raph because they said you're gonna have to trim up, you're gonna have to shave. And I told Raph, I said, look, man, I ain't got no problem. I'll trim up as best I can, but I can't completely remove my beard. And he said, why? I said, because it's going to be really hard for me to be this badass survivalist out there looking like a 13-year-old Amazon girl. I said, I can't do that. I got to keep a little bit of my beard.
yeah, that's funny. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know if they made anyone with like a beard like yours shave off completely, but mine was it's probably better that I shaved it off, honestly.
Well, it really captured, I love it. I got my before and after pictures and stuff from the show, the day one and day 55 or whatever, where the difference in the beard is insane. I remember who was it? Ryan Kinney. Did you meet Ryan Kinney, one of the cameramen?
I don't know if I'm
He's tall, kind of skinny. But anyways, he's a really cool guy. And he came out there one time and he said, man, your beard's coming in really well. I said, oh, I know it. The one thing I can do is grow hair.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm the opposite. I like takes me like 3 months to, and I look like a a teenager who's like just growing some facial hair because he's too stubborn to shave. And yeah, but that's what it. But
Well, man, I don't know what time it is there, but it's starting to get real late here. So
yeah, I bet.
I'm probably going to call it quits and go in here and try to get some sleep.
Yeah.
Got to go clean up. I've been working all day and it's just sweaty out here. It's bad, but man, I have had such a great time talking to you.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it has been so awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me, and I can't wait. I'm hoping to do this again if I can get everybody on board and in the right spot at the end of the season. Try to get everybody together on one of these calls to do one last kind of hoorah for it,
Yeah.
And so if you would be interested in that, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. Just let me know when.
Awesome. But it's been great, man. It's been awesome. You're just an awesome person, and all of the skills and stuff that you have shown have been amazing, and I truly appreciate it. But I'm gonna have to go in here and get me some sleep.
Yeah, that's important apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the chat, man. We'll chat again for
Yeah.
sure.
All right, then. We'll see you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.